People of Earth, attention. This is a voice speaking to you from thousands of miles beyond your planet.
Look, I love Gary. He's fantastic.
And you're listening to the Martian Revelations. Strap in tight.
Go to www.thefacesofmars.com. That's www.thefacesofmars.com.
According to a new report in the New York Times, the U.S. government may have physical evidence of, and we're quoting, off-world vehicles not made on this Earth.
Surely the days of the great Martian revelation are upon us.
Oh, that's right. We are caught up in the rush again. Day after day, deceived by the lies that they keep throwing our way. This conversation is indeed getting so out of hand, and it's definitely a big fucking pill that we gotta swallow. We gotta get up, we gotta wake up, and we gotta rise up. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and boys and girls, and all you ETs out there on the bite waves of the internet, and wherever you're at down through time monitoring this show. I'm Gary Leggiere, the Mars Revealer, known also as the Mad Martian, and I would like to welcome you all to the Martian Revelation that is upon you all again now. Welcome to the Bazaar. And today is August 29th of 2020, or the 30th, depending upon your time zone, as this as due time. Happy birthday, Ricky Dicky, and also my buddy Eric Drescher out there, belated by a day. And you're also listening to this broadcast through Global Enlightenment Radio Network stream, and also through the Martian Revelation Show YouTube stream live at
www.thefacesofmars.com. That's www.thefacesofmars.com.
FacesOfMars.com.
That's right, which everyone knows is your defense for the war which we all fight against evil dark mission is. We're all leading you away from the light and the truth and manipulating you all instead to help you open your wallets and your pocketbooks to only join their dark side in special clubs and their special subscriptions that only allows them more power to continue to mislead you all and to steer you all away from the truth that they themselves not wish to face or even admit to. Hell, let alone even talk about.
Yeah, UFO diaries.
Faces on Mars.
Cover-up controversy.
Down through time.
Huge conspiracy.
It is a conspiracy.
Okay.
That's right, but the Martian Revelation is, however, 100% listener supported with no special clubs or special subscriptions to join. So if you're a listener, please help support the Martian Revelation show again, which is your only defense for that war which you all fight against evil dark mission is. And we're working with the goal each week to bring you the truth one show at a time. So please share the FacesOfMars.com link. And I must also ask you all, though, that you please donate to the show with anything that you can afford by clicking on the big red, white, and blue American donate button at the top of the show page to allow it to continue being here for you down through time. As it is because of you, the listener, of which makes the Martian Revelation possible to be brought to you all back through time. So your listenership and your donation support actually counts. And it helps us all to not only fight, but to win against those evil dark missioners. As well as to secure a future which we all could literally make the Martian Revelation our reality. By what? By making our fate. And just remember also that if you're listening to this Martian Revelation show, then know this, that you are the resistance down through time. So we got an interesting show for you all tonight, as we got special guest Dr. Bruce Maccabee on with us during the next hour, helping us chew on that big pill that we all got to swallow, as the reality is now, regards to UFOs/UAPs, has now come full circle. And once again, it is at the forefront of this nation and the national concerns that we all should have, regards to whether or not, let alone or not, we are alone or not, but are they already here? But the other big pills to swallow regarding the Mars and why we got to get up, wake up, and rise up is the fact that the race is on to Mars. And the flotilla of international missions is already on its way. United Arab Emirates, got NASA Perseverance Forever, and of course the China's damn mission I wish that would blow up on the way or let one of these UFO/UAPs send it into the sun. Unless, again, I'll give them a little fair credit, or I would give them a little fair credit, if they happen to make it to Mars and actually have the balls to land at Cydonia. Remember, is our Vice President Mike Pence who said,
"And here from this bridge to space, our nation will return to the moon and we will put American boots on the face of Mars."
That's right. So if China wants to be a wise ass, poke the presidents in the chest, as they seem to be doing everywhere else around the world, why not land on that face of Mars? And, you know, we may be able to put our American boots there first, but they'll forever be able to say we landed there first, motherfuckers. So this is definitely the age of the robotic landers and rovers and space probes or whatnot being sent off by international nations, not all necessarily internationally collaborating now and cooperating, but it is indeed a race of prestige and a race of international intrigue. And certain nations need to get there first in order to forever wear the crown of who is more successful. The USA has a lot more to lose, especially after all this time, though we've had some successes. But to get there beaten like this in such a short time by the Chinese and their spacefaring expeditions, which is basically shit that they stole from us anyway, listeners here to this show can appreciate and understand. Look, even last week we went over this, and what happened early during the week? It was confirmed that we had some Chinese infiltrators inside doing intrigues of NASA and funds from that commie nation, dealing with that commie nation. So that should have, if anything, added a more seriousness to this, as it just only goes to show. As a Texas A&M University professor who is also a NASA researcher faces criminal charges of conspiracy, making false statements, and wire fraud after he allegedly hid affiliations with a Chinese government program designed to advance that country's high-tech development. Zheng Dongcheng, 53, of College Station, was taken into custody last Sunday, federal prosecutor said Monday. Ain't that some shit? And it's reminiscent from an article in May where FBI arrests a researcher for NASA who allegedly failed to report ties to China. Simon Saw Tiong-Ang, of 63, of Fayetteville, was arrested by FBI agents in May and charged with wire fraud according to a criminal complaint and affidavit that was obtained. And there the authorities allege that Ang, an electrical engineering professor and researcher at the University of Arkansas, Fayetteville, UA, since 1988, defrauded NASA and the university by failing to disclose that he had other positions at a Chinese university and Chinese companies in violation of the conflict of interest policies, according to the FBI special agent's affidavit in support of that complaint. So this has been going on all along for many years, being sold out by these commie American Democrat treasonous so-called leaders that's been offering pay-to-play, selling our secrets, selling our prestige, selling and allowing them to steal our space technology to be a threat against us, especially in this race, not only to Mars, but to have the upper hand and dominance in space. So how many more are out there, do you wonder? Many more. Remember, we've been infiltrated. The commie Chinese are not our friends. And their mission on its way to Mars is not one that would benefit us with any scientific research, imagery, or anything else, or for the betterment of mankind, but the betterment of their commie position of what they want to have up there in space, over us all and against us all. I just wanted to throw that out there. But again, as I said, I would give them credit if it was just to go there and land on the face of Cydonia, for they will ever be remembered for achieving that, proving once and for all that the policy of the turtleneck snail pace speed agenda that was set up by the commie craps and certain Republifox of those traitors who had sold us out to the Chinese and allowed them to infiltrate. It would be a good way to send us all back a middle finger. What a middle finger that would be. Again, that's balls. I would give them credit for that. That's it. Other than that, I hope it blows up. These other big pills to swallow, especially where it comes to life on Mars and what we've been touted to about that. But we'll get into that later. But until then, let's get into this first article as we got some news to get into. And this one's from August 20th. Deep learning will help future Mars rovers go farther, faster, and do more science. NASA's Mars rovers have been one of the great scientific and space successes of the past 2 decades. 4 generations of rovers have traversed the red planet gathering scientific data, sending back evocative photographs, and surviving incredibly harsh conditions, all using onboard computers less powerful than an iPhone 1. The latest rover, Perseverance Forever, was launched on July 30th of 2020, and engineers are already dreaming of a future generation of rovers. Are they? They're starting to dream of that now, of a future of a generation of rovers? We should already went through that dream. But anyway, while a major achievement, these missions have only scratched the surface, literally and figuratively, of the planet and its geology, geography, and atmosphere. The surface area of Mars is approximately the same as the total area of the land of the Earth, said Mihiro Ono, group lead of the Robotic Surface Mobility Group at the NASA's JPL, which has led all the Mars rover missions, and one of the researchers who developed the software that allows the current rover to operate. Imagine you're an alien and you know almost nothing about Earth, and you land on 7 or 8 points on Earth and drive a few hundred kilometers. Does that alien species know enough about Earth? Ono asked. No. If we want to represent the huge diversity of Mars, we'll need more measurements on the ground. And the key is substantially extended distance, hopefully covering thousands of miles. You should have been working on those goals to begin with. But traveling across Mars's diverse, treacherous terrain With limited computing power and a restricted energy diet, only as much sun as the rover can capture and convert to power in a single Martian day, or sol, is a huge challenge. The first rover, Sojourner, covered 330 feet over 91 sols, 91 Martian days. The second, Spirit, traveled 4.8 miles in about 5 years. Opportunity traveled 28 miles over 15 years, and Curiosity has traveled more than 12 miles since it landed in 2012. Our team is working on Mars robot autonomy to make future rovers more intelligent, to enhance safety, to improve productivity, and in particular to drive faster and farther, Ono said. The Perseverance Forever rover was launched this summer, computes using RAD 750s, radiation-hardened single-board computers manufactured by BAE Systems Electronics. Further missions, however, would potentially use high-performance, multi-core radiation-hardened processors designed through the High-Performance Spaceflight Computing HPSC project. Qualcomm Snapdragon processor is also being tested for missions. These chips will provide about 100 times the computational capacity of current flight processors using the same amount of power. All of the autonomy that you see on our latest Mars rover is largely human in the loop, meaning that it requires human interaction to operate, according to Chris Mattman, the Deputy Chief Technology and Innovation Officer at JPL. Part of the reason that is at the limits of the processors that are running on them. One of the core missions for these new chips is to do deep learning and machine learning, like we do terrestrially on board. What are the killer apps given that new computing environment? The Machine Learning-Based Analytics for Autonomous Rover Systems, or MARS program, which started 3 years ago and will conclude this year, encompasses a range of areas where artificial intelligence could be useful. The team presented results of the Mars project at HIE Aerospace Conference in March of 2020. The project was a finalist for the NASA Software Award. Terrestrial high-performance computing has enabled incredible breakthroughs in autonomous vehicle navigation, machine learning, and data analysis for Earth-based applications, the team wrote in their IEE paper. The main roadblock to a Mars exploration rollout of such advances is that the best computers are on Earth, while the most valuable data is located on Mars. Training machine learning models on the Maverick 2 supercomputer at the Texas Advanced Computing Center, or TAC, as well as on Amazon Web Services and JPL clusters, Ono, Mattman, and their team have been developing 2 novel capabilities for future Mars rovers, which they call drive-by science and energy optimal autonomous navigation. Ono was part of the team that wrote the onboard pathfinding software for the Perseverance Forever rover. Perseverance's Forever software includes some machine learning abilities, but the way it does pathfinding is still fairly naive. We'd like future rovers to have a human-like ability to see and understand terrain, Ono said. For rovers, energy is very important. There's no paved highway on Mars. The drivability varies substantially based on the terrain. For instance, beach versus bedrock. That is not currently considered. Coming up with a path with all these constraints is complicated, but that's the level of computation that we can handle with the HPSC or the Snapdragon chips. But to do so, we're going to need to change the paradigm a little bit. Ono explains that new paradigm is commanding by policy a middle ground between the human-dictated go from A to B and go do C, and the purely autonomous just states go do science. Commanding by policy involves pre-planning for a range of scenarios and then allowing the rover to determine what conditions it is encountering and what it should do. We use a supercomputer on the ground where we have infinite computational resources like those at TAC to develop a plan where the policy is if X, then do this. If Y, then do that, Ono explained. We'll basically make a huge to-do list and send gigabytes of data to the rover, compressing it in huge tables. Then we'll use the increased power of the rover to decompress the policy and execute it. The pre-planned list is generated using machine learning-derived optimizations. The onboard chip can use those plans to perform inference, taking the inputs from its environment and plugging them into the pre-trained model. The inference tasks are computationally much easier and can be computed on a chip like those that may accompany future rovers to Mars. The rover has the flexibility of changing the plan on board instead of just sticking to a sequence of pre-planned options, Ono said. This is important in case something bad happens or it finds something interesting. Well, that depends what they classify and clarify as interesting, because they have a lot of habits of running around things that are very interesting but go somewhere else less interesting based upon the perspectives of what they are looking for and what they think is more important, despite even if life or anything else was there that's so fascinating, they're sticking to their objective of what they think is more credible for what they want to see and find. Life be damned. Current Mars missions typically use tens of images of a sol from the rover to decide what to do the next day, according to Mattman. But what if in the future we could use 1 million image captions instead? That's a core tenet of drive-by science, he said. If the rover can return text labels and captions that were scientifically validated, our mission team would have a lot more to go on. Mattman and the team adapted Google's Show and Tell software, a neural image caption generator first launched in 2014 for the rover missions, the first non-Google application of the technology. The algorithm takes in images and spits out human-readable captions. These include basic but critical information like cardinality, how many rocks, how far away, and properties like the vein structure and outcrops near bedrock. The types of science knowledge that we currently use images for to decide what's interesting, Mattman said. Yes, and we should still be able to see the images and features as well, not just getting English words to describe to us to take away sight of what it's actually seeing. Especially because after we've been seeing so many interesting things there on the surface. But over the past few years, planetary geologists have labeled and curated Mars-specific image annotations to train the model. We use the 1 million captions to find 100 more important things, Mattman said. Using search and information retrieval capabilities, we can prioritize targets. But again, like I said, they just go for the targets that they think is a priority. Again, life or anything else be damned. But humans are still in the loop, but they're getting much more information and are able to search it a lot faster. Results of the team's work appear in the September 2020 issue of Planetary and Space Science. TAC supercomputers proved instrumental in helping the JPL team test the system. On Maverick 2, the team trained, validated, and improved the model using 6,700 labels created by experts. The ability to travel much farther would be a necessity for future Mars rovers. An example is the Sample Fetch rover, proposed to be developed by the European Space Association and launched in the late 2020s, whose main task will be to pick up samples dug up by the Mars 2020 rover and collect them. Yes, based on a turtleneck snail pace speed policy agenda. Again, don't get me into that now. But another big pill that's hard to swallow. But those rovers in a period of years would have to drive 10 times further than previous rovers to collect all the samples and then get them to the rendezvous site, Mattman said. We'll need to be smarter about the way we drive and use energy. And also don't forget the way you fly. If that thing, Ingenuity, the helicopter flies, they'll be using that for sure as a pickup and a drop-off, amongst as many useful uses. But before the new models and algorithms are loaded onto a rover destined for space, they are tested on a dirt training ground next to JPL that serves as an Earth-based analog for the surface of Mars. The team developed a demonstration that shows an overhead map, streaming images collected by the rover, and the algorithms running live on the rover, and then exposed the rover doing terrain classification and captioning on board. They had hoped to finish testing the new system this spring, but the Chinese Kung Flu shuttered the lab and delayed the testing. In the meantime, Ono and his team developed a citizen science app, AI for Mars, that allows the public to annotate more than 20,000 images taken by the Curiosity rover. These will be used to further train machine learning algorithms to identify and avoid hazardous terrains. The public have generated 170,000 labels so far in less than 3 months. People are excited. It's an opportunity for people to help, Ono said. The labels that people create will help us make the rover safer. The efforts to develop a new AI-based paradigm for future autonomous missions can be applied not just to the rovers, but to any autonomous space mission, from orbiters to flybys to interstellar probes, Ono says. The combination of more powerful onboard computing power, pre-planned commands computed on high-performance computers like those at TAC, and the new algorithms has the potential to allow future rovers to travel much further and do more science. And that's all fine and well. But again, the race is on and it has to go much faster than a turtleneck snail pace speed policy agenda-driven rover. It's really out of hand. But yes, on the surface of it all, it is quite fascinating. But again, this is supposed to be all equipped with the vision and the technology for the search of life on Mars. But listeners to this show can appreciate and not appreciate the reality of it, of the fact is that these missions, even though how it gets pushed to you in the news and everything like they're looking for life, it is in fact designed, not meant to even detect life, to be able to experiment on it to make sure it is life. They're only looking for possible signs of possible past life, let alone what may be running around, what they maybe see wiggling and jiggling or whatnot. Even if they did, they couldn't do an experiment that will be able to detect that it's life. Why? But we'll get into that soon. But I want to read an article, and it's from August 4th, out of Forbes.com by Ethan Siegel. And it's titled The 5 Possibilities for Life on Mars. And it's a little lengthy, and it can be a little boring, but it's historical. And those down through time would appreciate it. Because as we make our fate, there will be a point where our fate is made, and we will be able to look back and to see through the wool that was pulled off over all our eyes and the big bitter pill that we all were forced to swallow, to steer away from the truth that Mars is a lie. But anyway, let's get into this article. For as long as humanity has been watching the skies, we've been fascinated with the possibility that other worlds, much like Earth, might contain living organisms. There's a lot of people thinking out there much further beyond living organisms, but intelligent life. But anyway, while our visits to the moon taught us that it's completely barren and uninhabited, other worlds within our solar system remain full of potential. Venus might have life in its cloud tops. Europa and Enceladus might have life teeming in the subsurface ocean of liquid water. Even Titan's liquid hydrocarbon lakes provide a fascinating place to search for exotic living organisms. But by far the most fascinating possibility is the red planet Mars. This smaller, colder, more distant cousin of Earth most certainly had a wet past where liquid water clearly flowed on the surface for more than 1 billion years. Circumstantial evidence has pointed to the plausibility of life on Mars, not only in the ancient past, but possibly still living and perhaps occasionally active even today. There are 5 possibilities for life on Mars. Here's what we know so far. With the information we've obtained from various orbiters, landers, and rovers, we've made a slew of fascinating discoveries on Mars. We see dried up riverbeds and evidence of ancient glacial events on the Martian surface. We find tiny hematite spheres, or blue balls, on Mars, as well as copious evidence for sedimentary rock, both of which only form on Earth in aqueous environments, meaning with water environments. And we've observed solid subsurface ice, snows, and even frozen surface water on Mars in real time. We've even observed what it's likely to be briny surface water activity flowing down the walls of various craters, although the result is still controversial. Yes, many over the years have also claiming that it was dust rolling down as if it looking like a liquid. I don't think so. But all the raw ingredients that are required for life on Earth were abundant on early Mars as well, including a thick atmosphere and liquid water on its surface. Although Mars no longer appears as though it's teeming with life today, but there are 3 pieces of evidence that the past or even present life might be a possibility. The first compelling piece of evidence came from the instruments on board NASA's Mars Viking landers in 1976. There were 3 biology experiments performed: a gas exchange experiment, a labeled release experiment, and a pyrolytic release experiment, followed up by a gas chromatograph mass spectrometer experiment. The labeled release experiment yielded a positive result when performed on both Viking landers, but only the first time the test occurred. All other experiments came back negative, and there's reasons for that. But we'll not get into that now. I would allude everyone to go back to the archives of the Martian Revelation in 2018 to see the interview with Dr. Gil Levin. We'll hear what he has to say next. The second piece of evidence came when a fragment of a Martian meteorite, Allen Hills 84001, was recovered on December 27th of 1984. As it turns out, approximately 3% of all meteorites that fall to Earth originate from Mars, but this one was particularly large, nearly over 4 pounds heavy. It originally formed on Mars some 4 billion years ago and landed on Earth only some 13,000 years ago. When we looked inside of it in 1996, it appears to contain material that could be the remnants of fossilized organic life forms, although they could have arisen from inorganic processes as well. But they don't show or prove that model to make that statement correct, in my opinion. And finally, the third piece of evidence came out with NASA's latest Mars rover, Curiosity. As the seasons changed on Mars, Curiosity detected bursts of methane emitted from specific underground locations, but only at the end of the Martian winter with the onset of spring. Just like it does on Earth, people. And it's life on Earth that sprues up that methane seasonally. Think about that. But this is, again, an ambiguous signal at best, as inorganic geochemical processes could be seasonal and result in the release of methane. Yeah? Show us that. Show us that model. Prove it. That's a good theory. I want to see it put to the test, because what I've seen here on Earth, you couldn't duplicate it, especially to that scale. But I'm not a scientist. I'm just crazy. But organic biological processes could cause this as well. Yes, indeed. And it's the most likely, strongest cause here on Earth that does that. But when we look at the full suite of evidence, at everything we've learned about Mars, there are 5 possibilities for the history of life on the red planet. It could be an eternally barren world. It could be a world where life thrived for a time, but then hit a dead end. It could also have extant life on it today. It could also have been seeded by Earth life early on, or it could only have Earth-based organisms that made their way there since the dawn of the space age. Okay, one can see that is possible. Meteorites from Earth hitting Mars, just like Mars's meteorites hits the Earth. Okay, but here's what each possibility would mean. 1, Mars never had life on it. Despite having the same raw ingredients as early Earth and similar watery conditions, the necessary circumstances that enable life to form simply never occurred on Mars. All the geological and chemical processes that occur inorganically still happened, but nothing organic. Then, a little more than 3 billion years ago, Mars's atmosphere was stripped away by the sun, drying up any liquid surface water and leading to Mars's current appearance. But this is the most conservative stance, and will require that all 3 of the purported positive tests have either an inorganic or contamination-based resolution. This is eminently possible and remains, in the mind of many, the default assumption, until some very compelling evidence comes along that robustly points to either past or present life on Mars. This will likely remain the leading hypothesis. Of course, ignoring the fact of the past, like you mentioned about Viking, and what we'll go over in the next article. But 2, Mars had life early on, but it died out. This scenario, in many ways, is just as compelling as the prior one. It's very easy to imagine that a thick atmosphere similar to early Earth, stable liquid water on the surface, continents with rich geological diversity, volcanoes, a magnetic field, a day similar in length to our own, and temperatures only marginally cooler than Earth's today. And that could lead to life. To many, it's virtually impossible to imagine that these conditions, after more than 1 billion years, wouldn't lead to life, considering that life arose on Earth no more than a few 100 million years after its formation. However, the loss of the Martian atmosphere had a profound effect on the planet and could have resulted in the extinction of all life on Mars. But what about inside it, with the subsurface illegals? But drilling down into the sedimentary rock of Mars and searching for fossilized life forms or even metamorphosed carbon-rich inclusions could potentially reveal the evidence necessary to validate that scenario. 3. Mars had early life and it still persists in a mostly dormant form beneath the surface. This is the most optimistic but still scientifically viable view of life on Mars. Perhaps life took hold early on, and then when Mars lost its atmosphere, a few extremophiles remained in a sort of frozen, suspended animation state. When the right conditions emerged, perhaps on the ground where liquid water can occasionally flow, that life wakes up and begins performing as critical biological functions. Remember that therefore they're trying to answer for the bursts of methane seasonally, okay? So they have to include that one. But if this is the case, then there are still organisms to be found beneath the Martian surface. See, that I believe. Again, the subsurface illegals. But perhaps in the shallow sands just a few feet or even mere inches below our spacecraft. But we're likely only talking about single-celled life, perhaps not even reaching the complexity of a eukaryotic cell. But life on any world other than Earth would still be a revolution for science. NASA's Perseverance Forever rover, which launched successfully in July 30th, 2020, will collect critical soil samples to attempt to test this hypothetical scenario. Right, again, but they choose to prioritize sites away from, again, sites that may help yield better results, especially when we're dealing with archaeological search for extraterrestrial intelligence concepts as well. Now, here's number 4. Mars didn't have life until Earth seeded it naturally. 65 million years ago, a very large, fast-moving body impacted Earth, creating Chicxulub crater and kicking up enough material to blanket the Earth in a cloud of debris, leading to the 5th great mass extinctions in Earth's history. And like many massive impacts, this one likely kicked up small pieces of the Earth all the way into space, the same way that impactors on the Moon or Mars send meteors throughout the solar system, where some of them eventually land on Earth. Well, a few impacts likely to go the other way as well, sending Earth-borne material to other worlds, including Mars. It seems unreasonable that the material in Earth's crust, rich in organic life, wouldn't make it to Mars at all. Instead, it's eminently plausible that Earth-based organisms made it to Mars and began reproducing there, whether they thrived or not. Perhaps someday we'll be able to know the full history of life on Mars and determine whether any of it has the same common ancestor that all extant life is descended from here on Earth. It's a fascinating possibility that isn't easy to dismiss. Fine. All right. But how about fully understanding the history on this planet? Again, all of us here on Earth can't even duplicate the pyramids or the ancient structures, the ancient blocks and bricks. With our high advanced technology today, we cannot duplicate. So answer that shit for me first before we figure out the microbiology of Mars, let alone the interesting archaeology features on the surface of Mars. Learning what's here on Earth would help us understand what we're looking at and seeing there, in my opinion. Our modern space program spread Earth-based life to Mars itself. Perhaps Mars was truly a barren, lifeless planet, at least for billions of years, until the dawn of the space age. Perhaps spaceborne materials that weren't 100% decontaminated or sterilized landed on the Martian surface, bringing modern Earth organisms with them as stowaways. And that's always possible, okay? You know, fine. All right? The problem with that is that what is there has been there far longer than our missions going to Mars. I mean, let's just look at it. I think the majority do not really accept this model, but it's a model, all right? Fine. But it's the ultimate nightmare of astrobiologists that there's a fascinating history of life to uncover on another world, but we'll contaminate it with our own organisms before we even learn the true history of life on that world. Well, yet, let me digress again here. Yet they want to bring samples back here to Earth, not to cislunar orbit to be studied and determined, and the effects it will have on known examples of life here on Earth, how it would interact with that, then bring it to the ISS as a second barrier, and then bringing it back to the Earth. But yet, that's okay. But they don't want to send in anything there to contaminate what may be there. What? A damn amoeba? I mean, give me a break. But yet it's okay to send it back here on the Earth. I want to mention about the newer series from the 90s, The Outer Limits. Watch that show titled The Sand Kings. Okay? Then many of you will get my point here. But in the worst case scenario, it could be that the case that was surviving simple life on Mars of Martian origin, but that Earth life arrived and outcompeted it, driving it to a rapid extinction. Really, everything that we brought there made life dead. After detecting life aboard the Vikings, again, we'll get into that next. But this very real healthy fear is why we're frequently so conservative from a biological perspective when we explore other planets and foreign worlds, which just shows that they're openly admitting that they don't have a clue what the fuck they're talking about. Because why would they be so conservative from a biological perspective when they explore other planets and foreign worlds, and yet they're telling us how and what Mars is and what Mars is not, while keeping facts of previous experiments not being replicated on today's experiments, not even to detect life, let alone to show the evidences of a past life. How are you going to show the evidences of a past life if you're not there equipped to fucking detect life? I mean, I'm crazy, but am I stupid? So it just shows that they're going out of their way, admitting to us that they don't know what the hell they're talking about. So use your minds. But there is a tremendous hope that current and future generations of Mars rovers and orbiters will help us finally puzzle out whether Mars, either now or at any point in its past, has ever harbored life. Again, this is a mainstream point of view, and I try to keep my madness inside of me when I read shit like this, because that's ignoring and putting a middle finger up to us all who happen to see interesting archaeological features on the surface, other than geologically interesting features on that surface, okay? Because it shows things to which even high advanced forms of biological life could not do without intelligence, all right? Again, a SETI prospect. But again, let's continue on with this article. But if the answers to the question is affirmative, that Mars had once harbored life, then it leads to an important follow-up question. Is that life related to or independent of life on Earth? Is it possible that life originated on Earth and seeded Mars with life? It's possible that life originated on Mars and then seeded Earth. It's even possible that life predated both Earth and Mars, and early forms of it took hold on both planets. I think that one's might be the best outcome, but that doesn't mean that life cannot interact differently to adapt to each planet and these planetary conditions within a range of variables that I would say I would have to be genetic somehow, or, I mean, come on, again, I'm not the scientist. I'm just a crazy person. But at this point in time, we have no overwhelming evidence that life ever existed on Mars at all. We have a few hints that could be indicators of past or present life there, but entirely inorganic processes could explain each and every one of those observed results. Again, not visually through the archaeologically interesting features on that surface, it can't. But again, that's not what they prioritize. They stay away from those. No-go zones, because they're leading you on the trail of a story, not the story. You see? That's how it is. That's the reality of it and the politics of it. But as always, the only way we'll find out the truth is by conducting more and better science, really, with superior instruments and techniques. Yes, which they left off of this Perseverance Forever rover. They're taking forever to do the right thing that we paid for. And again, we're going to get into that a little bit. But as NASA's Perseverance Forever rover moves ahead to collect a variety of soil samples, the next step will be returning them to Earth for laboratory analysis. You see, that's openly telling you they're going to return it to Earth, not somewhere in cislunar orbit as a barrier wall before it reaches Earth, or in even low Earth orbit as a secondary wall as it was, to confirm and to do tests and then send it to the Earth. Again, the Sand Kings. But which of these 5 possibilities is the most consistent with the truth about Mars, of which we went over? Because they're not taking into account the interesting archaeological factors also on that surface, because that would answer a whole hell of a lot of questions, at least for the long run, which we could do there more exploring to figure out these major controversy of issues and questions now in regards to microbes. They don't want to openly go up and investigate the intelligence issues and questions of the SETI prospects of what this investigation should also entail, and they just stick in the mud. They're sticks in the mud. They go against even wanting to discover basic microbial lives. Because why didn't they put it on board the Mars 2020 rovers or on any other rover, the ES-8 Rosalind Franklin? Both are equipped with multi-million-dollar genius tests and this and that to look for signs of possible past life, not to determine signs of any possible extant life, or let alone to determine that it is life. So how the hell are they going to acquire the evidences of the signs of the possible past life? Possible, it's a possibility. So I think we all most definitely got rained, because it's not meant to answer those questions, but they have the ability to do so. You know the problem, listeners to this show greatly appreciate this, and even from Dr. Gil Levin himself, they're mainly concerned with trying to prove Darwinian evolution. All of these findings are going against Darwinian evolution, which has not even been proved as a Darwinian fact. But that's what they use as the models to even educate our kids today and everything. Darwinian evolution. And you don't want to go showing archaeological interesting features, because that leads to a creationism issue. Because who created that then? You know, this shows an intelligence question, but they steer clear from it. But Leonard David put out an article on the 24th titled "The Case for Life on Mars, Viking Scientist Underscores Evidence." Again, and this is referring to Dr. Gil Levin, and he's 96 years old now. And there was a campaign. Again, I'm not going to get into all that. I'll just get very pissed off. Screw you very much, John B. Wells and Richard C. Hoagland. But I'll say we tried to have a campaign to be initiated that would have forced publicly the issue for his proposals that he's been submitting for years that would keep being denied. And the last one sent back to him actually in a cab, 96 years old, where NASA came to him for the 1976 discovery of the Viking landers, where it did detect life. All right, so again, but this is very important. And considering what it is we're actually doing and what these flotilla missions are supposedly being sent for to do, while we got the bigger issues staring right at us in the face, pun intended. So instead of going over Leonard David's article, let's go to Dr. Gil Levin himself while he explains this all, okay? And this is about 13 minutes long, so we'll be running a little over the top of the hour. But this is pertinent to consider. The truth about whether or not we found life on Mars and whether or not Mars is life now, instead of turtleneck, snail pace, policy, speed, agenda, trying to make us swallow this big bitter pill. So let's listen.
I'm Gil Levin. I'm currently an adjunct prof in the Center for Advanced Scientific Concepts of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences of Arizona State University, Tempe. For a long time, I ran a company I founded way back in 1967, which is what really got me into this trouble. My path to Mars began on the beach at Santa Monica, and it involved the optics of looking at bubbles. Complicated? Well, not really. I was working for the California State Health Department and was patrolling the beach at Santa Monica, picking up water samples to determine when the water should be quarantined to keep people from swimming in it. In those days, primary sewage flowed right out on the beach. There was virtually no treatment. The trouble was, it took nearly a week to get the results back from those tests. And that's the optical part. The tests were run by inoculating a test tube of nutrient broth with a little bit of the suspected water, and then waiting for bubbles to develop. Well, I got the idea, why wait for the bubbles? if I tag the nutrients with radioactive carbon, the carbon dioxide coming out, formed by the bugs eating the nutrient, which produces the bubbles, will be detected long before visible bubbles, because radiation detectors are so sensitive. So, to make a long story quite short, some 30 years later, I was able to put together an experiment that went to Mars to look for life by picking up a sample of the Martian soil. The Viking spacecraft lander did that, and inoculating it into a small tube in which a squirt of radioactive nutrient was placed. Were any microorganisms present, hopefully, they would recognize the nutrient, eat it, and give off radioactive gas. Well, no one, including me, was very hopeful this would work on Mars. However, the possibility of life on Mars was so astounding that NASA described the whole experiment of looking for life on Mars as perhaps the greatest experiment in the history of science, which is puzzling, because while they still say that, there's something wrong in their lack of pursuit of it. At any rate, surprisingly, as soon as the first squirt of nutrient hit that Martian soil, we got a big bulge of gas coming out. And it came out for the entire 7 days, or Martian sols, of the experiment. That was astounding. But we had conceived of that possibility being false, being absolutely conducted by chemicals in the soil rather than microorganisms. So we had a test for that too. We had a control experiment, carefully designed, really designed by NASA. And it was, if you ever, unlikely, got a positive response, you would take a duplicate sample of that same soil and put it in a little tube, just like the first sample, but now heat it to 160 degrees centigrade, a temperature they selected as killing any microorganisms known on Earth, but not high enough to destroy oxidizing chemicals that might have given a false answer. So this is called the control. You run the control, and if it's positive, then the agent that was active survived the heating, so it's not microbial, it's chemical. But if it's negative, you've killed something that had been alive, and that's the confirmation that it was indeed a positive response for living microorganisms in the soil of Mars. That is what happened. Not only did it happen, but at Viking 1, it was duplicated, and it happened again. And the control happened again. At Viking 2, 4,000 miles away, we got a similar response, positive. I decided to make the control a little more rigid. You know, maybe 160 degrees could kill some chemistry. So I reduced it to 50 degrees C, and the response was reduced 2/3. Something had happened at 50 degrees C. But more than that, while we waited for the season to rotate in Mars, we held the active sample in a chamber for 2 months before we dared move it again because it had been so cold. We shot the LR experiment again on that same sample that had been active, and after 2 months stored in the dark at 10 degrees centigrade, a very modest temperature, it was dead. There was zilch in the way of a response. That is pretty hard to explain away chemically. However, the naysayers were up to it. And at first they proposed ultraviolet light is activating the soil, and that's what you're detecting. So we challenged that. We asked and had the engineers agree to send that arm out one morning just at dawn, move a rock that had been there probably 1 million years, take a sample under that rock and test it. It was as positive as the other positive sample. Gone was the UV. Next, they got the idea that there is hydrogen peroxide or some strong oxide covering the entire surface of Mars. And that is killing microorganisms and destroying any organic matter, because the instrument NASA sent to identify the organic matter everyone knew was on Mars. They doubted there was any life, but no one doubted there was organic matter because it came from the same sources as it did on Earth. That instrument found 0 organic matter. Well, now NASA was really faced with a problem. One experiment says life, the other experiment says no organic matter. Ignoring the fact that the experiment that said life could detect as few as 10 cells on Earth, which it had done, remarkable sensitivity, and the fact that the experiment looking for organic matter required the organic matter of 1 million cells to detect it, they wrote it off and said, nope, no organic matter, quote, there goes the ball game, end quote. For the 37 intervening years, NASA and other astrobiology scientists have been explaining away, or attempting to explain away, the labeled release, my experimental results. They've been unsuccessful. No one has ever reproduced in the laboratory or even in theory a chemical that will react in that manner and give those control results. But it did not bother them. They still contend that it's some weird chemical. One of them even said perhaps it's chemistry turning into biology. We may have arrived at Mars at an historic time. Well, since then, we've learned so much about life on Earth that it exists every place, except perhaps in red-hot lava. But wherever you go, up, down, sideways, there's something alive under conditions that are sometimes as bad as any on Mars. And yet, these bugs thrive on Earth. Since my experiment, NASA has refused to send another life detection experiment to Mars or any place. Every time I have sent in an upgrade of my original experiment as a proposal for a new spacecraft, it's been rejected. I was told directly by the head of the Mars program, if you send in another proposal to send an experiment to look for life on Mars, it will be immediately rejected. That's bad science. The reason they give is because if they got another equivocal answer, which they now admit, we're not sure it wasn't life, but it's at least ambiguous. If we got another ambiguous answer, it would hurt our program drastically. So we're not going to take a chance. That is not science. That is politics. Science demands, if you get a positive result, you go back, replicate it, and then expand it and learn more by the same technique. Well, we had already replicated it. It worked 2 times at Lander 1. It worked 2 times at Lander 2. What more replication do you want? I had come up with a method of improving the experiment by making it chiral in nature, distinguishing left and right hands. Your left and right hands are not identical. You can't place one on the other. All living organisms that we know of use only left-handed amino acids and right-handed carbohydrates. I had mixed them in the solution I sent to Mars because they wouldn't give me 2 instruments to keep them separate to see if there were a difference in the responses. I now propose to test them separately. Every astrobiologist I've spoken to has agreed if the organisms ate only one isomer, the left-handed or the right-handed, that would be proof of life. Chemistry cannot distinguish between those isomers. Biology always does. Those proposals were similarly rejected. Now, In the intervening years, several experimenters have demonstrated there was something wrong with the instrument that went to look for organic matter on Mars. And they have explained it away, they have impugned it. None of the original complaints against the validity of the labeled release experiment remain, except the general statement, it's the consensus of astrobiologists that life was not detected. Now, science doesn't work by consensus. As a matter of fact, when Jim Martin set our Viking 1 down on the ground, he had delayed putting it down for 2 orbits because he had seen these rocks on the ground. He took a vote of the scientists assembled there, 17 of us. All 17 said, let's go down. We're going to run out of time. And he says, well, thanks for your opinion. Science is not a democratic process. We are not going down. And he went 1 more orbit and got us down safely. What I'm trying to do is get us down safely to rid us of the paradigm that we are alone. We are not alone. There is life on Mars, and that means there should be life throughout the cosmos. The next experiment should be to send up that chiral experiment to see whether the life on Mars is the same as life on Earth or different. If the chirality were different, that would be a stupendous discovery. It would open up the cosmos to life.
So there you have it, the words of Dr. Gil Levin. I think that should ring true home to most of you of what the truth really is. This is about science, and it should be done based on science, not the doctrines of men or politics getting into the way of what the truth is and what it should be to us all. Well, everyone, we ran a little over, but I think it's time for us all to go to a break and then come back and introduce our guest, Dr. Bruce Maccabee. In the meantime, I'd like you all to please
go to www.thefacesofmars.com. That's www.thefacesofmars.com.
That's right. Scroll on down the page to the information for tonight's guest and the links to his website and as well as his books. And then scroll on down, check out Dr. Mark Carlotta's latest Before Atlantis article, Ruins in the Stands, Evidence of a Lost Civilization in Central Asia. And also be sure to click on the link for his book, Before Atlantis, New Evidence Suggesting the Existence of a Previous Technological Civilization on Earth. Again, the things that we can't explain. And scroll on down the page more. You can see that I found another face of Mars. And it's an odd face, but it's definitely, in my opinion, a face of Mars. You got 2 Mars Express views, one in color and one MRO CTX image of it. That's slightly off nadir. I want an on nadir, like the one in the Mars Express image. But either way, it's pretty rather interesting. And the fascinating thing about it, too, is that that face is also 1.5 miles long by 1 mile wide. What does that remind you of? Quite the coincidence. But under them, check out Rami Bar-Ilan's cool latest Mars finds of his exclusive Mars images. And click on those links there to go there and see the work of him as well as many others who are finding fascinating features there on the surface of Mars via the Curiosity rover. So on that note, I would like to let everyone know here that we have a motto on this show listeners of the show could appreciate. Pack them and smoke them, because you're definitely going to need them when we come back on the Martian Revelation.
I'll be back.
Don't run. We are your friends.
Imagine that everything the U.S. government has told you about UFOs since Roswell has been a lie. Imagine that in a decade after Roswell, the government attempted communication with the aliens and succeeded. And after that, in absolute secrecy, things had gone far, far beyond this. Now imagine that tomorrow, the whole secret program is going to fall apart, and every terrible thing is going to come out. All we have left now is a prayer. Morning Star Pass. The collapse of the UFO cover-up. A fictional but unflinching and terrifying look inside the UFO cover-up, the secret government that supports it, and the world of the aliens themselves. And then, how the whole secret kingdom ends. Morningstar Pass, a book that pulls no punches and does not sheath the sword unblooded. Morningstar Pass, plunging boldly where no other book has ventured, captures the whole wondrous nightmare that the UFO experience has become. From bizarre experiments performed on helpless abductees, to horrifying mutilations, to beyond, to the world of secret government supported by its own secret police, to the aliens in their secret bases, and finally to the beckoning stars themselves. The book does this by placing the cover-up, humanity, and the Earth, and the real cosmos, where humanity and its passions are a part of the universe, not an aberration on it. Then comes the fall of the cover-up, and a climax of violence and desperation, to leave the human race facing the multi-hued stars with eyes open and seeking its place in them. The sands of time have run out for the cover-up, for against it, leading an army of investigators and warriors, comes Cassandra Chen, beautiful, driven, and doomed. Who can save her and us? You'll have to read it to find out. Morningstar Pass, The Collapse of the UFO Cover-Up by Victor Norgard. Get yours today. You can find this at www.firstbooks.com.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Gary Leggiere, host of Mars Avila, also known as the Mad Martian. And you're listening to the Martian Revelation that's upon you all again now. Indeed, quite the secret. So let's introduce our guest, Dr. Bruce Maccabee. And he can shed light on some of these secrets that are only now coming to light, and many are trying to pretend it's like some type of new thing. Our guest, I believe, he will agree that these are far from any new thing. And this reality is definitely a pill that we all must swallow. So let's introduce Dr. Bruce Maccabee. And Dr. Bruce Maccabee is the author or co-author of about 36 technical articles and more than 100 UFO articles since 1970, the year I was born. He studied physics at Worcester Polytechnic Institute in Worcester, Mass. He has a Bachelor of Science in Physics. And then at the American University, Washington, D.C., he's got an MS and a PhD in physics. In 1972, he began his long 36-year career at the Naval Surface Warfare Center, presently headquartered at Dahlgren, Virginia. He has worked on optical data processing, generation of underwater sound with lasers, various aspects of the Strategic Defense Initiative, ballistic missile defense, and Navy ship defense using high-power lasers, and the development of optical sensors for use in detecting deadly materials commonly used in chemical and biological warfare. And Dr. Bruce Maccabee has been active in UFO research since the late 1960s when he joined the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, NICAP, and was active in research and investigation for NICAP until his demise in 1980. He became a member of MUFON in 1975 and was subsequently appointed to the position of State Director for Maryland, a position he held for about 30 years. In 1979, he was instrumental in establishing the Fund for UFO Research and was the chairman for about 13 years. He presently serves on the national board of the fund. His UFO research and investigations, which are completely unrelated to his Navy work, have included the Kenneth Arnold sighting of June 24, 1947, the McMinnville, Oregon Trent photos of 1950, the Gemini 11 astronaut photos of September 1966, the Skylab 3 astronaut sighting of September 1973, the New Zealand sightings of December of 78, the Japan Airlines JAL 1628 sighting of November in 1986, the numerous sightings of Ed Walters and others in Gulf Breeze, Florida, 1987 to 88, the Red Bubba sightings from 1990 to 1992, including his own sighting in September of 1991, the New Mexico video of August of 97, the Phoenix Light sightings of March 13th of 97 at 10 p.m., the Mexican Air Force case of March 2004, and the Iran jet case of September 1976, and many others. He has also done vast historical research and was the first to obtain the flying disc file of the FBI, the real X-Files. So this should be pretty interesting with our first-time guest here, with Dr. Bruce Maccabee. And thank you very much for joining us, sir. Hopefully you're doing well tonight, and thank you very much for appearing on the Martian Revelation. How are you tonight, sir?
I'm pretty good so far.
Oh, excellent, excellent. But, you know, I don't know if you caught it from the news onward. I know it could be treacherous for some people, but I must do it. But the big pill that we all have to swallow, isn't it funny? Today's UFOs/UAPs, or UAPs rather, are in the shape of a pill. A big pill. And it looks like we're going to swallow it. What do you think? They'll swallow us. But again, thank you very much for being on. I know your history into this has been vast over the years, and now the term from UFO has obviously shifted politically and publicly, called UAP now, unidentified aerial phenomena, now, as if it's like some new thing. But yet, this isn't new at all, is it, sir? And again, fill us all in, because I can imagine how you must feel regarding all this work that you've put in over the years, and to bring us to the reality of which, in my opinion now, we must be told, because of the seriousness, because obviously it wasn't meant to be covered up forever, or there's no way to, because of the escalation. And now the Pentagon, the government, coming clean with some of this. But go ahead, sir. Welcome again.
Yeah, well, the fact that the Pentagon finally admitted that the videos, which became available in 2017, those videos, we know now the Pentagon admits that they were taken as the witnesses had claimed from sightings by pilots aboard F-18 flying jet craft and also from Navy ships. Until the Navy admitted, the government admitted that those things were real, the skeptics could get away with saying, well, it's probably a big mistake. But it's kind of hard to argue with the sort of the authority of top Navy people getting together now and saying we're going to start a task force because the Navy, and this, we presume this also goes to the Air Force, although the Air Force seems to have been the guy in the background, not watching what happened rather than being part of it. But anyway, the seriousness of the situation means that the newspapers and news media in general that have treated the subject as some part of Looney Tunes science can't get away with calling it so Looney Tunes now, because these things were detected on top level instruments, you might say, radar and optical devices, and the witnesses were trained observers. When David Fravor says that he saw an object that looked like a Tic Tac, which is 40 feet long, I would have called it a natural gas tank that you might get for your house.
Right, like propane, right.
Big cylinder with rounded ends. But anyway, going several thousand miles an hour is pretty good for a candy.
Yeah, indeed. Now, over the years, again, though, all the work that you and many others have put forth over the years, even going back to Roswell, this is all still interrelated and connected, is it not? I mean, you mentioned you work for the Navy. Unrelated is your experience and work from UFOs, or was there in your Navy days and work in any involvement that you could speak of, or at least acknowledgement from people you worked with or even missioned on that had a focus or anything to say about UFOs back then, to which now, hey, again, you're witness. I mean,
well, the Navy, as I was working for the Navy, I didn't do none of the things that I did for the Navy had anything to do with UFOs. Right. However, I had access to equipment and stuff like that the average person wouldn't have, let's say, and photography and so on. And so I made good use of my time in the Navy or working for the Navy. I made good use of my time with respect to UFOs as well. And it was quite a learning experience. For example, one of the first things that I tackled was these photographs by the Trent photos, which probably everybody's seen. They may be the most widely publicized photos ever since they started in 1950. And practically every book that talks about UFOs and has illustrations shows one or the other or both of these photos. The neat thing about the Trent photo case is it's either a hoax or the real thing. There's no halfway point. A lot of UFO sightings, it's a little blob way off in the distance, and you can't be sure exactly what it is. Could it be an insect up close? I get videos and photographs all the time where somebody takes a photo and then days, weeks, months, maybe even years later, looks at the photo and sees this little black spot in it somewhere and says, I wonder what that was. Could it be a UFO? And it might be, but there's no other information to go with it. But anyway, with the Trent case, the images are big enough so that it's clearly a circular thing tilted to look like an elliptical bottom of it, and the side view as well. And so I had to do a lot of experimenting with photography and so on to find out whether or not this could be an object up close to the camera within 10 feet or a distance away. And I learned a lot about photography on that. And then the New Zealand case came along in December of 1978, and I happened to be the person effectively chosen to investigate that. And I was confronted with radar, which I fortunately knew something about, but also the 16 millimeter color movie film, which had thousands of frames of images on it, and I had to analyze that and find out what these things represented. So it was a big learning experience. I happened to get connected with the CIA in 1984, and that came in handy 2 years later after this Japan Airlines 1628 big jumbo jet saw UFOs over Alaska. It was made international news, and that case has been in the news a number of times because John Callahan, who was the in charge of investigating that sighting, he kept his mouth closed in 1986. But after he retired in the early 1990s, he started blabbing his guts all over the place about this of this sighting and what they did. I was able to write a very complete history and analysis of those sightings and publish it in 1987 in a UFO journal. The reason I was able to do that was because the CIA gave me the documents that Callahan talks about all the time as being stolen by the CIA.
Huh. Is that where you talk about on bio about the flying disc file, or the FBI real X files, or is that something different?
Well, the Japan Airlines 1628 case was in 1986 in November. The FBI file on UFOs starts in June of 1947 and goes continually up until the 1950s.
Huh.
I was the first person to get that, oddly enough, because I was working on the Trent case, the photos. I was not only as a physicist here, I was doing not only optics, which is physics, but also history, and also interviewing of witnesses. Well, I learned that Mr. Trent claimed that after his photos had been published, he was working there at some farm one day, and a couple of FBI guys showed up and interviewed him. And so I had this document saying that the FBI had interviewed Trent in 1976 when I was when I was working on this Trent case. I decided to see, this is a couple of years after the Freedom of Information Act. So I decided to see if I could get any information out of the FBI on Mr. Trent. Did he have a record, essentially, with the FBI? And so I sent a letter in the fall of '76 to the FBI saying, could you tell me if Mr. Trent has ever been a person of interest in the FBI? And, oh, by the way, if you have anything else on UFOs and flying saucers, please let me know. I didn't expect to get anything, because the only references to this were the FBI was in a book published in 1955, the report on unidentified flying objects by Captain Edward J. Ruppelt, who was the head of Project Blue Book at the time. And he wrote in his book that the FBI had never been involved, but I took a chance that they might have something anyway. So in 1977, I sent this letter to the FBI saying, can you tell me anything you can about Trent? Oh, by the way, if you got anything on UFOs, let me know that too. So 2 weeks later, I get a letter from the FBI saying your request is number 30,456 or some nice number like that. So I expected I might hear something by the end of the century.
Yeah.
And 6 months later, I get a phone call at my desk at work. I get a phone call from a very surprised FBI agent who said he had located a file on flying discs which had something like 1,600 pages of stuff in it. And so that's where the FBI file began to get some traction, I guess you could say. I wrote papers about it and ultimately put it into a book. The most recent edition of this book is called The FBI-CIA UFO Connection. It's basically a history book, but there are some UFO sightings in it which require scientific analysis to understand why the things are unexplained. My approach to this subject has always been slanted towards proving that there was something that was unexplained. Then you can go ahead and theorize as to what it might be. A lot of people got themselves all wrapped around the axle by trying to promote some theory as to what these things are. Right. And there's no way of knowing until we get one. Now, the government may have something, but it doesn't do me any good. If I'm trying to theorize about UFOs, what the government has covered up doesn't tell me anything. So well, I kept my time, rather than writing papers on theories about UFOs, I was writing papers on analysis of cases and determining whether or not there was stuff in there that should be known, or if the thing could be explained. For example, in the New Zealand sightings, which I've brought up several times in the past for the last 40 years. 40 years ago, 1978, these sightings in December of 1978. They had radar targets on the Wellington Air Route Traffic Control Center. They had radar targets that would be at a place on the screen for one sweep, and then the next sweep of the radar beam that goes around in a circle. This is old-fashioned radar, not the new stuff. The old-fashioned radar had a round circular tube screen that you're looking at, and you had this radial line which represented the beam itself sweeping around the screen. And that ordinarily you would have for example, an airplane traveling along, picked up by this beam. Each time the beam sweeps around, it would cause a bright little arc on the screen. And this arc would stay on the screen and decay slowly. So at the time that the beam comes around again, you've got the newest sweep is the brightest arc, and then there's a little one that's a little bit dimmer behind that. And the sweep comes around again, you got a brighter one. You got three bright ones, with the most recent one being the brightest. And for a typical thing like an airplane, you'd have a line of little arcs showing where the airplane was and where it was going, where it had been. But in this night, they had what they call weird targets, where there would be just a single sweep of the radar that would be picked up, and then it wouldn't be picked up again. That would be sort of an impossibility for something that was like an airplane, because the airplane can't go fast enough. The sweep is every 12 seconds. The airplane can't go fast enough to get out of range of the radar in 12 seconds.
How fast do you think it must be? How fast do you think it must be? How fast must that be in order to escape the sweep then, by your estimations?
It depends on how far it goes from one point to the next. But hundreds to thousands of miles an hour. Now, I was doubtful about that when I did this analysis 40 years ago. But now with the Navy coming along saying that they have measured, one guy that I talked to, Kevin Day, who was a radar man, tracking these objects from an altitude of 28,000 feet down to the surface as they zip downwards in 0.78 or 0.8 of a second to go 28,000 feet. That corresponds to some huge acceleration followed by a high speed for a short period of time. So that high acceleration and high speed explains what I found on the radar targets in New Zealand. So here we have two things 40 years apart, sort of supporting each other.
Yes.
The physical analysis shows that the acceleration would be enough to turn a human being into a puddle of jelly.
Wow, a human being. Now, do you think these are controlled? Well, no. Piloted by a being that could withstand that, or do you think are these mysterious craft and technology you think of this Earth or inside this Earth, or the obvious next best step, which we would consider because of the impossibilities of it, is from not of this Earth, from some other world? What is your opinion?
Well, I've called it NHI, non-human intelligence, and this is sort of a neutral as to where it comes from. I say the easiest, the simplest thing to contemplate is that they came here from way over there, wherever that is. We don't know what the limitation in our own travel capabilities would be 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 years from now. But if you were to assume that there was out there somewhere a civilization that was 1 million years old, who knows what they could do with the universe? They've got capabilities that we can't even imagine. What's his name? Arthur C. Clarke used to say, sufficiently advanced technology would appear as magic.
Right.
So anyway, I am partial to the extraterrestrial hypothesis as opposed to time travelers or dimension travelers or warping speed, warping space, or whatever.
How come? I mean, that's a good question. How come? Because a lot of people are leaning more toward that way now, and I wonder if it's just because that's the latest acceptances for what they can't really explain. In my opinion, for all I know, they could be from Mars. Forget.
Yep. They could have a hole in the pole at the top of Mars, in the big frozen lake up there.
Yes, it is amazing. So now, mind you, in your work, so it wasn't really the Navy that got you first inspired into wanting to do this. That just happened to be extra added knowledge for you, for your benefit in doing this research overall from the beginning.
Yeah, well, I got interested in it before I started working for the Navy. I was going to American University in Washington, D.C., which was where NICAP was headquartered. And I had read a couple of books, Flying Saucers, Serious Business by Frank Edwards, and the book by Captain Edward Ruppel that I mentioned before, and a couple others. And then I learned that there were going to be two guys from NICAP speaking at the American University at a public lecture. And so I went to that, and one thing they said was, well, our office is downtown Washington, D.C., and we could use help, volunteer help with secretarial type stuff and so on. I envisioned NICAP, National Investigating Committee on Aerial Phenomena, was the largest civilian organization at the time investigating UFOs, and it was international in scope and in all the books, so I assumed it was a big organization. And I went to, I finally got around to going down to the headquarters of NICAP at 1536 New Hampshire Avenue or some number like that. And I was a bit disappointed when I saw that it was one building in a row house. And I was upstairs, so I walked up the stairs in this hallway. It had a single light bulb at the top for light, for illumination. And I began to be a little apprehensive that this wasn't a very big organization after all. And I opened the door, walked into the main office, and there were stacks of books and boxes and stuff all over the place, and one little old broken down lady running the whole show. She was quite intelligent, however, I was able to handle the job, but was appreciative of having me show up and do some stuff for her. She wanted to have a single piece of paper that summarized what NICAP knew about UFOs, so she could easily grab onto something and send it off to people who requested things like send in a letter saying, please send me everything you've got on UFOs, to which the correct response would be, bring a truck.
Wow. Yeah.
But anyway, that got me connected up with the local subcommittee. NICAP investigating groups were called subcommittees, and they were scattered throughout the United States and several other countries. And these groups were the people who actually did the case investigations. The subcommittees did the investigations. So the Washington, D.C. subcommittee had some cases in 1968, I guess it was. This is about the time of Project Blue Book had been running from 1952 up until the middle 60s. And the general public wasn't getting very good answers from NICAP as to what was going on. And then in 1965 and 66, there were notable sightings in the Midwest, and Congress held a big symposium, sort of, to decide what to do, especially after Hillsdale, Michigan sightings in 1966, I think it was. Anyway, that was the time of the when Hynek was called to try to get people uninterested in these sightings, and he came up with the explanation that it might have been swamp gas. That's how the swamp gas explanation originated in the spring of 1966, because some of these sightings had been lights moving around in a slightly swampy area, and I realized this was not a very good explanation, because in March there's not much marsh gas. It's mostly gas that is generated in hot weather, not in the winter. But anyway, Congress directed the Air Force to support an investigation other than Project Blue Book. And that investigation ended up taking place at the University of Colorado under Dr. Edward U. Condon. And it lasted about a year and a half, and they investigated a number of things, including the photo case I talked about before, the Trent case. Then while this University of Colorado project was going on, for a period of time there, about a year or so, it was legitimate to talk about UFOs without having a bag over your head. But then, when the Condon Committee finished its work, and Edward Condon wrote that despite all the effort they had exerted, there was nothing, they hadn't found anything extraterrestrial and nothing that was a threat to the United States. Condon's opinion was that the Air Force should get out of it. And guess what? In December 1969, the Air Force got out of it. Project Blue Book closed, and there was after that no official, no publicly known group investigating UFOs. And UFOs had been quite a bit in the news media in the 66, 67, 68 time frame. And when Project Blue Book closed in 69, UFOs dropped out of the major news media, and only people who were more members of UFO groups knew that the sightings were continuing. And since by that time I was a member of NICAP, I knew that things were happening, and actually went on a couple of investigations with the subcommittee in Washington, D.C. area. And then in the spring, the late summer, I should say, of 1973, was a flap of sightings, including some famous ones. And at that point, it became clear that it was, we're back. Sightings were coming in all over the place in the eastern half of the United States.
Right.
And at that point, I decided, well, maybe I ought to do something myself, some investigation. And I started off doing some statistical analysis and so on. But that was when I got interested in doing the Gemini 11 case, September 1966. Gemini 11 astronauts, Conrad and Gordon, in this little capsule going around the Earth, seeing an object that was going, well, it went in front of them and below them. I guess they didn't worry about it hitting them, but to see anything close by in outer space like that, especially back in those days, is phenomenal because there's so much space between things.
Right.
Anyway,
which was remarkable. Right, which is remarkable because in 1947, the Roswell crash, which obviously the military themselves were the ones to announce it to go public to begin with, and then what was found out, like through Stanton Friedman, Crash of Corona, and all the other work done in it, and especially Colonel Corso's book, got more into details on what the extraterrestrial biological entity was, and that it was not from Earth. So that kind of matches up a little bit with what you were saying, what you believe they may be. What are your thoughts on those genetically engineered, I guess, bodies that fuse with the craft? I guess that would solve some issues technologically and physiologically about traveling into space, though they may be more advanced than we are. So what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that all these crafts could be having these type of entities involved in them, and or also autonomously? Like, I know the shapes also changed over the years, but I'm jumping ahead. Go ahead. But those are two very good points. What do you think about that?
Well, there's sort of like two quite different possible explanations for why you can have high acceleration without destroying the intelligent life on the inside. One is if the NHI is a machine itself of some sort that can withstand extreme stress under acceleration. If you can take a piece of metal and convert it into an intelligent being somehow, it could withstand considerable stress. Considering, we know the bullet flies out of the muzzle of a gun, and that doesn't crush the bullet.
Right.
The bullet exists until it hits something, and then when it hits something, it undergoes an extreme deceleration, acceleration in the backward direction as it slows down to zero. It may be able to withstand that if it can. Then, if it's a machine type of thing, it could be able to do it. The other possibility is that you have one of these warp space situations. You first have to analyze what it means to undergo acceleration. If you're sitting in your car and you step on the gas, you can feel yourself pressed into the seat that you're sitting in.
Right.
And the faster you accelerate, the more you get pressed into the seat. Well, the reason is the seat is being pushed forward by a mechanism of some sort. It could be a rocket, could be wheels on the ground, whatever. It's something which is allowing the seat to be accelerating. And since you're sitting in it, it's accelerating you. But it's a push on you at one place on your body, your back, for example. And if you push hard enough on your back, hard enough, you can crush yourself. I wouldn't recommend it. And they did numerous tests back in the 1950s and 60s having to do with how many G's, how many times the acceleration of gravity can somebody withstand and still be able to work. And I think it was several, but I don't remember what the exact number was. But the thing is, if you could, well, what's being pushed on are some cells in the part of your body which is on the back, against the back of the seat.
Mm-hmm.
If you could come up with some way of accelerating where your front body cells on your stomach are pulled at the same rate as the back body cells on your back, so that there's no compression. You're not, see, there's a compression when under ordinary circumstances you step on the gas, the back seat of the car pushes into your back, and it takes some time for this push to go through your body to your front, and so your back is crushed in a little bit before your stomach starts to move, and you get this differential crushing effect when you get ordinary acceleration. If you had a rocket ship, if you had a rocket, for example, you got a rocket exhaust going out in the back and pushing hard on whatever is in the front of the rocket, and that tends to squish the rocket nose, I suppose. But being a piece of metal, it doesn't matter. If you were in the front end of the rocket, though, and if you were tied to a big bullet and shot out of a gun, the acceleration would squish you just as much as anything else. I remember there's some carnival type guys, you remember, who shot themselves out of big guns?
Yeah, human cannonball.
Yeah, right. So with a human cannonball, he's not being accelerated that much. But if he was shot, if he doubled the load of gunpowder at the back end and tried to fire himself out, he would probably end up being a couple inches shorter by the time he hit the ground. Anyway, the point that I'm making is acceleration that we can handle, that we can do, control, like shooting a bullet out of a gun, requires that there's some surface which is being pushed on, and the opposite surface, the surface on the other side of the body, is being crushed inwards. And if your back is pushed so hard that it causes your body to contract, I guess, collapse, that's not very good. But if you could come up with a force that pulled on or pushed on every element of the body you're trying to accelerate, like if you had a sphere, for example, and you had a force that could apply the same amount of force at each point on that sphere, then you could accelerate it without causing it to squish, because the whole thing would be accelerated at once, rather than just having the back of it accelerated.
So it's kind of like a force field force.
Huh?
Right? Is that what you're describing, like a force field, that force?
Yeah, right. It's like gravity. Gravity is exactly, if you are up in an airplane and you feel that you have weight standing on the floor of the airplane, but the floor of the airplane suddenly gives away, you suddenly don't realize you have any weight. But guess what? You are accelerating. You are accelerating towards the earth. And it doesn't hurt one bit, because the top of your head is being accelerated at the same rate that the bottom of your feet are, and you're not being compressed. So if you could figure out how to warp space to cause this create a motive force out of space that would be like gravity and act on every part of the body at the same time, you could perhaps accelerate yourself. There's a famous proposal 10 or 15 years ago. A guy worked out a way that you might be able to warp space in such a way that you create almost like a sleigh-like effect, S-L-E-I-G-H,
Right.
Your front is being accelerated at the same rate as your back, so you don't notice any squishing effect. If it were possible to warp space and do that, then you could presumably accelerate yourself up to extremely high speeds and you wouldn't know it.
Now that could be applicated on the inside as well as outside the vehicle if that could be harnessed, correct?
Yeah, that's another thing. Another way to look at this is suppose that you're inside a hollow sphere or inside a cylinder, and the cylinder suddenly gets accelerated. If space isn't warped, then when the back end of the cylinder reaches you, you get whacked by the cylinder back, and you get pushed forward, and you can get squished. But the ideal thing is to come up with some force that pushes on all the parts of the sphere that's around you and all the parts of you at the same time, so there's no relative compression effect.
Wow.
Then you could ride along in your sphere at high speed, and who knows how fast you could go. Might even be able to go faster than the speed of light, and you wouldn't be turned into a ball of jelly. You presumably would have some way of slowing down and stopping and opening the door and getting out and feeling pretty damn good for yourself, having traveled 445 light years in 2 seconds.
So, in your opinion, then, now, like for the show pick, I use that, the UFOs there flying over the Capitol there, over in Washington, D.C. Now, can you explain the history of that, and also what that was relevant for, and how that may still be relevant today? And is there an increase of these, well, I don't know what you would call them, of these people or this tech, for the lack of a better term, than there was previously? Has it been escalating, and has the shapes been changing? Because, like you mentioned, the Tic Tac, I mean, but yet they're having the same characteristics as these flying discs. Is that right? And what would be the implication and the real message of that flyover of D.C.? What do you think that was for?
Well, that's a pretty good thing to discuss. And by the way, it's one of the key things in the book I wrote called The Legacy of 1952, the year of the UFO. In the summer of 1952, there were in June, July, August, the largest number of sightings per day occurred. They had 50 sightings per day in July, near the end of July in one day. But they were having hundreds of sightings per week. And some of the sightings occurred over Washington, D.C. area. Now, in my book, which is not very long, I concentrate on the year 1952 and what happened because of this big flap of sightings, which included sightings over the restricted areas in the Washington, D.C. area. Why that happened, I don't know. If you track the history of the subject starting in 1947, you have, in the spring of 1947, various people seeing odd things in the sky and not thinking much about it because nobody had stood up and said, look, there's flying saucers around.
Right.
The average person seeing something up in the sky might think that's puzzling, but well, this is just after World War II, and there was a lot of developments of all sorts of scientific things in World War II. Who knows what the Air Force and the Navy and the Army might be working on right now as I'm looking at something going over that I never saw before, some disc-shaped thing or a ball, silvery ball or whatever. Might be some new development of the Air Force. But then in June 24th, 1947, we have Kenneth Arnold, a private pilot, seeing these objects go by Mount Rainier. I wrote a whole book just on this one sighting, and it's not like any other UFO book you ever read. It shows you exactly how to analyze sightings, what I call scientific investigation. But anyway, in 1947, you had Kenneth Arnold sighting being publicized. It was the first sighting to make it into the newspapers. And once this sighting made it into the newspapers, other people who had seen things started coming forward. And then there were more and more sightings that occurred after his, including 2 weeks later, the Roswell case. People seem to think that ufology sort of started with Roswell. The Roswell case had almost zero impact on the way the subject was treated for 30 years. It wasn't until 1977, 78 time frame when Stanton Friedman, who was deceased a year and a half ago, anyway, he located the first technical witness. What's his name?
Marcel?
Marcel, yeah, Jesse Marcel, right. He located Jesse Marcel. Marcel was one of the people involved in the Roswell cover-up. But the point I'm making is, you saw the story about the first newspaper story saying they got a flying disc, and then the next day, the flying disc was crushed into a bunch of aluminum foil and so on, and the sighting was so well covered up, nobody paid any attention to it for 30 years. And the major part of ufology developed, therefore, in the absence of Roswell. And there were hundreds of sightings in 1947, in June, July, and August of 1947, and then the sighting rate dropped off. This is all in my book called The FBI CIA UFO Connection, by the way, which shows you how we got to where we are. You have to understand the beginnings of the subject if you want to really put together an understanding. But it still doesn't answer the question of what were these things doing. Why did they have this big flap of sightings in 1952, and well, they didn't hurt us, so far as I know.
Yeah, but it was definitely, in my opinion, a show of force. Certainly you, as a Navy person, may have that mindset too. Even without them using force, that's definitely a show of force, in my opinion. Do you know of others that felt the same way, or was it just played down?
Well, you're talking about them being a force.
Yeah, they were doing that by flying over, again, like you said, restricted airspace of Washington, D.C., and them flying over like that. That's a show of force. Right.
They certainly got the interest of everybody at that point, and the government was very able to. Well, the subject was so weird, and that a major explanation for why it was treated the way it was is what I call the self cover-up. We've always been talking about the government covering up those stuff, but I'll tell you the fundamental cover-up is the self cover-up. This is a subject that few people, if any, want to have it to be true. We'd rather not know anything about it, knowing there are other intelligences out there that can stomp on us at a moment's notice. Not too good for our psyche. So what I call the self cover-up comes in, where people basically ignore it and hope it'll go away. You stick your head in the sand deep enough, you won't know what's going on, and you can be nice and happy.
Especially when obviously they haven't gone away.
Well, obviously they haven't gone away. It's an acclimating process, I suppose. They're getting, and this sudden admission by the Navy that these things are real is the next big step in this acclimating process. And a lot of people are going to have to come to grips with the self-cover-up is going to fall apart. The more you get beaten on by stories in the press and so on, saying that these things are really flying around, and you begin to have to reevaluate what does it mean to you. Does it mean anything? Or are you really impacted by this or not? Back in 1952, thousands of people were suddenly confronted with these objects flying around. Nevertheless, because the government poo-pooed the whole thing. If you read the book, The Legacy of 1952, you find that the key thing that happened was when General John A. Samford, who was the Director of Air Force Intelligence, held a press conference. After 2 weekends, when there had been sightings over Washington, D.C. area, he was directed to hold a press conference. And he basically said at this press conference that they had investigated a number of sightings, about 2,000 sightings, I guess, and or 1,000 sightings, I guess at this point, and hadn't found anything that was a threat to the United States, and didn't find anything about unusual technology involved. And he said, as far as he was concerned, it was all, the unexplained cases were all natural phenomena. This was directed in particular towards the radar sightings that they had over the weekends. The radar had picked up things in the same area where there had been visible lights, and the radar targets were zipping around and doing things that are very similar to what the Navy talked about for the Tic Tac stuff. We don't know what.
Maybe they're what I'm thinking also is that they see our radar and they know what we're doing, how we're watching them, and they're doing it to blow our minds, to let us know, again, their show of force.
Yeah, well, they're playing with us. That's my...
Well, ultimately, yes, but also for a reason. They're seeing our radar. They must be able to see it at this point, so compared to the scale of tech they have to do and accomplish the things that you describe and others have of these crafts and what the government is alluding to today. But if it was dropped all those years ago, why all of a sudden bring it up again? I mean, this is really odd. And that's why I believe, like based on Brookings, you mentioned acclimation. We are at a time now, in my opinion, where we must be told. And therefore, like you said, we're going to have to come to terms with this and adapt. That's what I always say, too. So I think we're on the same wavelength there. But is that the explanation? That they would do that all of a sudden and then change it to new acronyms even to make it more official, take away the giggle factor that they themselves policied under it to begin with?
By they, are you talking about the government or the entities?
The government.
The government. Yeah, the government is still got this at arm's length, trying to hold it off as much as possible. It's getting tougher and tougher, of course, when you got some of your own people, as the Navy people, coming out being in favor, in a sense, in favor of UFOs being real, because they've seen things, and it's kind of hard to explain away.
Right.
That's one reason why I concentrated my my effort in studying this subject, is to find unimpeachable sightings where something definitely happened and you can prove it, and it's something unusual. You can't find any conventional explanation. So when you run out of conventional explanations, then the unconventional must be the answer. So that required a lot of physics analysis to be able to rule out explanations For example, a good example is the Kenneth Arnold sighting. I have in my book 3 Minutes in June, and that title, by the way, is based on the 3-minute sighting that Kenneth Arnold had, and he saw these objects starting from his far left. As he's flying eastward, these things are north of him, and as he's flying eastward, near Mount Rainier, these things went past Mount Rainier and south or down to Mount Adams, and he timed the time it took for him to go from Mount Rainier to Mount Adams. It was 102 seconds, and it was about 50 miles. That corresponded to around 1,700 miles an hour. At that time, in June of 1947, our top speed was about 600 or 700 miles an hour.
Right.
Chuck Yeager broke the sound barrier in the fall of 1947.
Right. Wow. Huh. So, again, they've been here for a while. Do you think it's for our benefit that they're doing this? Because you're familiar with, obviously, with Robert O'Dean. He's also passed now. He states that, you know, this game that the nations play, but yet they're going to show up sooner or later themselves and reveal themselves to us if the governments of the world don't do this. Do you think this is why maybe the Pentagon is making this new policy of bringing it public now to the issue of these UAPs and whatnot, is to tell us before the entities or the intelligence does it themselves, even though ain't they doing it already by them flying around?
Right. Well, that's to prepare us for the truth, because the government has been advancing an untruth for the last 70-some years. And now they've got to slowly get us out of that untruth into what's really going on.
Right.
When I say they're playing with us, I try to look at it from their point of view. Here they are doing, sort of like doing whatever they want to be doing, and we blunder into the area where they're doing it, and then they have to either pay attention to us or not. In a lot of cases, where somebody be like driving along a road and coming around a corner and seeing a craft off on the side or on the road or whatever, and the craft then takes off as if it didn't want to be seen after all. This is an example of the Lonnie Zamora police case in April of 1964. One of the more important UFO sightings in the history of the subject, where he sees this object near the ground, on the ground, drives towards it. As he's driving, he sees a couple of creatures that by the time he gets closest as he can get to it, the creatures have gone, and then the thing takes off. But it's like they might have been doing something, and then Lonnie Zamora, the policeman, blundered into what they were doing, and they had to get the hell out of there real fast for some reason or other. But in other words, like, we're an annoyance to them. But at the same time, I think they're curious about us. In this New Zealand case, something happened there on radar, which is totally unique. The plane was flying southward from Wellington to go to Christchurch, New Zealand. You can look this up on a map and you'll see what I'm talking about. Wellington is the south end of the North Island of New Zealand, and Christchurch is about halfway down the South Island, about 100 miles or so. Anyway, the unique thing that happened was that the plane was flying southward. It's being interrogated every 12 seconds by the Wellington radar. The Wellington radar is seeing a little arc being created every 12 seconds as the plane flies in a straight line. Then they begin seeing little arcs appear, single arcs appear in various places around the screen. And a single arc is not a conventional type of return. What causes the arc on the radar screen is a electromagnetic signal bounced back from the target, whatever is out there, like the airplane. And the airplane doesn't go very far in 12 seconds. So any conventional aircraft tracked by this radar will have a series of little arcs, gradually fading out over a period of time. But then there was a series of radar targets. One which was behind the airplane, then one which is at 3 o'clock at 4 miles. That is off to the right-hand side, 4 miles away, according to the radar was picking up the arc of the airplane, and this other thing, whatever it was, off of the right-hand side. And then all of a sudden, and this is all tape recorded, by the way, so it's documented. The air traffic control guy says, "You have something flying in formation with you. It could be left or right. Your target has doubled in size." What I call a double-sized target incident in the New Zealand case.
Wow.
There's only one way that can happen. That is if the so-called radar cross-section doubles. And the radar cross-section is a combination of all the reflective surfaces of the airplane. The airplane doesn't change. It could change its radar cross-section by turning left or right, but the airplane flew in a straight line. It didn't go anywhere, didn't turn at all. So the cross-section for the airplane remained constant during this time. Something else was right next to the airplane that increased the amount of reflectivity and so close that the radar couldn't distinguish between it and the airplane. That's, so far as I know, even I don't know everything that the government has, but I doubt that the government has a case like that. This shows that the I'll just say creatures inside this thing probably were sort of like toying with the airplane. They didn't get in its way, but you can imagine them watching this airplane fly southward, and they zip over and say, "I think I'll get real close to this airplane, see what it looks like."
Right.
It's showing intent, the intent to do something, and curiosity. Let's go over and get close to this airplane and see what that really looks like. See if we can scare somebody on the inside or whatever.
Well, it seems that's escalated because, like on Tucker a couple months back, listeners to this show can appreciate, they were talking about, I forget the gentleman's name that was with him, but he said that Chinese and Russian pilots have acknowledged not just also seeing and chasing them, but engaging them where lives were lost, craft was lost, lives were lost, and I said, hey, that's a soft disclosure, meaning that so must have ours. So from playing with us to now where there are, pilots dying by engagements, and maybe engagements always were, but I don't know. But now they're saying soldiers, pilots dying and stuff like that. Is that up the ante now? And of also why they need to come and tell us, get the public ready. But on that note, before you answer, sir, if you don't mind, if we could go to a quick 6-minute break. Are you cool with that?
Yep, fine with me.
All right. Please mute your mic until we come back. But that's really interesting, people. Think about it. Flying around, show of force, playing cat and mouse and playing games with us here on the earth and in the air. That's still also a show of force, and also testing capabilities. Many things can be gleaned out of that and the reasons. But ponder that, people, as we pack them and smoke them, because you're definitely going to need them when we come back with our special guest, Dr. Bruce Maccabee, on the Martian Revelation.
I'll be back.
Don't run. We are your friends.
For 5,000 years, the world was ruled with wooden ships by one man. 242 years ago, a small group of free men declared independence and crafted a new nation based on liberty and freedom. Global elites have been fighting to destroy this new nation called America ever since. Based on actual events, Charm of Favor tells a true story of how they took over the election system. They infiltrated federal agencies. They murdered witnesses, judges, and even presidents to keep from being caught. Now the largest and wealthiest crime syndicate the world has ever known is at war with America. They have already killed hundreds of Americans and recently attempted to assassinate half our congressmen. Still, they escape arrest through an almost supernatural charm of favor. Read Charm of Favor and be prepared to open your eyes to what may lie just around the corner. Charm of Favor is available on Amazon or Barnes & Noble.
Yes, indeed. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Gary Leggiere, your host, Martian Beeler, known also as the Mad Martian. Of course, you're listening to the Martian Revelation. That's upon you all again now. So we're back with our guest, Dr. Bruce Maccabee. But everyone, I would like you all, if anyone would like to call in with a question, let's dust off the cobwebs of this timeline, see if it still works. Odin, I tried asking unless the numbers change, but it's 202-684-6955. 202-684-6955. And what are your thoughts about these UFOs? And if you have any questions for Dr. Maccabee regarding to this new age, this new transition that we're making now to a time where we must be told. And I think that's where I get Dr. Maccabee is bringing us to that standpoint. But like he says, we've been being acclimated. Time to take the giggle factor out now, start putting the seriousness in it. Now, what if it could be because, like where we left off, like on Tucker, it was right there, and therefore the soft, unspoken disclosures that not only have the Chinese, I have another word for them, listeners of the show can appreciate, and Russians have engaged these various unidentified aerial phenomena, UFOs. Let's get back to it. UFOs. Okay? Same thing. And have lost lives. That ups the ante, because I don't hear too many stories or reports in the past of such engagements and lives being lost. But that also alluded unspokenly that ours must have engaged them too. Have you heard of many engagements in the past and lives being lost in dealing and toying around with these UFOs, Dr. Bruce?
Yeah, I haven't heard of a lot. There have been some cases of aircraft, I guess, being shot down or something, disappearing.
So that takes
it's not a case of engagement. During the week between two weekends, when in 1952 and in late July of 1952, when there were sightings over the Washington D.C. area, it came out in the press that the Air Force pilots had been ordered to try to get these things to land, and if they wouldn't land, to shoot them down.
Right.
And there was some questioning attitude in the press. Is this a good idea? But I don't particularly know of any aircraft that were shot down at that time. But
so then takes it to a new level. There's a new level of escalation then, in that sense.
Well, if the Russians really were shot down, I say yes. I don't know. I know of some cases where aircraft have disappeared. There was the famous one in January of 1948. The guy who supposedly was chasing a big balloon, and he crashed his aircraft. Perhaps, well, initially it was thought one of these things had shot him down. That appeared to be incorrect, but there's another one in the late 50s, case you can read about on my website if you look for Hawktail, H-A-W-K. The guy whose code name was Hawk, H-A-W-K, told me about an incident he was aware of that happened in Japan when he was stationed as a weather officer in a big American Air Force base in Japan in the late 1950s. And he says they had seen these objects appear approximately where the south end of the North Island and there's this water gap between North and South Islands and the main big islands of Japan. And that was where there was a Air Force base, the headquarters of the 5th Air Force, I think he said. Anyway, he was the official weatherman for this base. And he says that when a few weeks after he transferred to the base, one of his friends invited him to go into the control room and see things that were happening, and so he'd know where his reports for weather went to the people in this control room. And he said he was in there talking to his friend, when all of a sudden the control room became, everybody was suddenly paying attention to what was being heard over the loudspeaker system. The loudspeaker system, well, he said that he was told by his friend that something like, "They're back again." And he asked his friend, "What does that mean? Who's they?" And his friend says, "These objects, they pause over the water, the gap in the north, between the North and South Islands. They pause. They will come zipping up to some location there and stay there for a short time, and then take off." And so this they had one of these objects had come and was hovering over the gap of the water between the North and South Island. And Hawk said they put in a call. He was told they put in a call to Washington, D.C. to see what they should do about this, if anything. And the word came back to try to shoot it down. So there were 2 airplanes specially instrumented, he was told, that would handle this problem, but one of them didn't work. So the other airplane that did work went by itself up to some high altitude. And Hawk said that he was asked by the control people what the weather would be like when the jet got up above the clouds. And Hawk gave an immediate weather report, and then he could hear conversations between the air traffic controllers and the pilot. And the pilot gets up above the clouds and goes into a circular track until he's told what to do. And Hawk said that he became aware from listening to the conversations of the radar traffic controllers that they had put in a call to Washington, D.C. for instructions, and the instructions were to shoot it down. So they told that to the pilot, and the pilot, they could hear over a loudspeaker system, they could hear what the pilot was saying. And so Hawk said he heard the pilot talking about how he came up through the clouds and he was going into a circular pattern. He could see the object at some distance. And then when he was told to roll in, the pilot started heading towards the object and fired off a couple of missiles, which he said blew up but didn't get to the object. They blew up before they got to the object. Huh. And then the object started heading towards the airplane, and the pilot turned, and Hawk said that he noticed a distinct change in the tone of voice of the pilot. Somebody who was extremely controlled, but nevertheless scared excrementless. And the pilot was saying, "The thing is coming after me, it's coming after me." And on the ground in the air traffic control center, they're watching on radar, and they see the radar target for the object and the radar target for the airplane, and the object is pulling up, coming faster than the airplane and catching up with it. And then the 2 targets were merged, and they were one big target for a short time, and then that disappeared.
Wow.
And Hawk said that he was called in for weather reports for 48 hours straight while they tried to find out where this airplane had gone, and nobody knew. Anybody can read about that on my website. It's quite an interesting story about Hawk's own particular experience.
See, that's why I wish they would have gave out when they mentioned that on Tucker. I mean, it's like, whoa, well, please fill us in with, some more of this info. I mean, that's new, in my opinion, and I'm surprised no one really latched on to that to really try to press him, or maybe I should just email him just for shits and giggles, because again, that's an escalation. If he's saying this publicly, there's got to be something that could publicly connect to it more so than the guy who was on that was bringing it up, because where'd that information come from? I mean, and then obviously what's being unspoken is that therefore so much of ours have engaged and lost lives too. And, and now we have a Space Force, which had to be created so quickly, from threats coming from deep space, which is why it was really created, as well as for the obvious reasons the president said, for low Earth orbit and from the threats on this planet, but it's the threats coming from deep space that they seem more pressed with. He also told General, who was it, Dunford, and you got it? Good, now go get it. And I always keep saying, go get what? You know what I mean? I mean, that's pretty telling. What do you think, Mr. McAbee, Dr. McAbee?
Well, like I said, if you are consider us versus the ants, compared to an ant, we can move at the speed of sound or the speed of light, just by walking. If the ants could set up devices to measure the speed of human beings, they would find that human beings can travel much bigger distances than ants can.
Right.
Now, when we look at the ants, we realize that they have much less capability and understanding than we do, so we have to give them the benefit of the doubt, I guess. When I start building an anthill, we can sit there and watch them build an anthill and think that's pretty good for an ant. But if we don't have to be stuck there, we can go and jump in the swimming pool and swim around and have a good time while the ants are working to build an anthill to live in. And we can just go back and monitor what they're doing and say, isn't that interesting, and do a thesis on the way ants build an anthill.
Yeah, and where the ants just coming out of it scrambling. Oh, that's very telling. So, okay. So you're not closed-minded then that it's obviously a militaristic scenario we're going to be dealing with, for who knows what their real true intentions are with this planet, never mind us. They may have more interest in the planet.
There may be a situation where they know they are so far advanced that they're not at all afraid of us. If it's a situation like an object is sitting there and not doing anything, and you fire a gun at it, it knows it can zip away faster than the bullet can travel or something like that. Basically, if they know that we can't hurt them, they may be happy to just sort of leave us alone, have some fun with the natives by zooming around the skies and doing impossible things. Like we've had a lot of reports of just plain orbs, lights of various colors moving around. What the heck are these things? They're not the classic flying disc saucer. They're not the classic triangle. They're not even a cylinder or tic-tac shape.
Right. That seems to be again. Are you familiar with that tic-tac shape? Back then, in any of the reports or sightings that we've heard, of cigar shape, UFOs and stuff, but this seems to be very specific and different.
Well, it depends on how accurate Dave Fravor was with his description. There have been, like you said, cigar-shaped things, and cigar is maybe a very long, narrow version of a tic-tac. Depends on depends on whether Fravor got his aspect ratio correct. If you took the Tic Tac and squished down the radius so that it becomes more like a telephone pole, you could still do the same things and you travel at high speed and virtually vanish. I have a video of a sort of a compact. We don't know the exact shape because it's very small, but a compact object reflecting sunlight off the coast of Florida near Gulf Breeze way back in 1993, I think. And Ed Walters was videotaping this thing. It was hovering and doing one of the observables that Lou Elizondo has been talking about. The anti-gravity must be being used somehow or other because there's no aerodynamic shape to this object, and it's not moving. It doesn't have rotating helicopter blades. Somehow it manages to hold itself up there without any obvious means of doing that. And then all of a sudden, they put the pedal to the metal, or maybe they put the pedal right through the metal and take off. And the thing has been hovering for many seconds at the middle of the screen, and then in 5 frames, that's 5/30ths of a second, it goes off the screen. And it goes so fast once it gets going, and it gets going almost immediately. It goes so fast that if you aren't looking at it at the time that it starts, you've missed it. Eye blink is too long a time to be able to see this thing before it zips off the edge of the screen. Now that's documented evidence of what these Navy guys are saying.
Right. I don't know if you're familiar. I got a buddy, a previous guest on this show. We got to get him on again. And Wilbur Allen. He's done a lot of amazing work capturing these things zipping around, and they vary in color. They vary in shapes even. He's done extensive. If anything, I'll show you a link to his. I'll send you a link, sir, to his video thing. I would maybe even he would like to hear your opinion on that. On those objects. He seems to share the similar characteristics of what you just described, which means, again, everyone, this is not new. The names are changed, but the game's the same. Or has the game, well, been escalated? But I think it's fascinating.
I know Wilbur. We've been in communication quite a bit over the years.
Oh, that's
good.
You
got a 202 area code, so you're near Washington, D.C.?
Who, Wilbur?
No, you.
Oh, well, that's the show number line. The Global Enlightenment. My other.
Okay.
But if anyone would like to call in, more power. These, a lot of times normally get a lot of questions, but just through text alone, and a lot of people in Russia, believe it or not. OK.ru, etc. I mean, there's a lot of places out there, and I think Odin's still hitting on the realms out there, the bite waves of the internet, the Netherlands, where he's God. So, but the subjects are still very fascinating. So there's nothing new. These have been around, but there seems to be escalation. Then, I mean, again, all of your work and research of all those years and what many people know about them and these crafts and the technology, the technology, those shapes change, they seem to be consistent as well. Correct? Tech. And by that tech alone and the abilities, is that why also, sir, you think that they may be coming from some other world in order, again, to get from here to there very quickly, and who knows what their true speeds are in space to get to point A and B, right? But is that why also you think it's otherworldly? And do you think it could be the moon, bases on the moon? Are you I'll say not a believer, but theorists of that they may be on the moon or from Mars or maybe both? Are they Dracos? Are they reptilians? Are they this? Are they that? I mean, the whole door over all the years. And what is your thoughts on the secret space program entwined in all that?
Well, I haven't tried to investigate the secret space program. I do know back in 1980 I was at a meeting of some government officials, and they started talking about what they called the Black Shuttle. This is before the shuttle had even taken off, the first one. So there could well be something going on. It would be kind of hard to cover it up from everybody. Now all sorts of people have satellites up there monitoring the Earth. When it was basically just us monitoring the Earth, few people could get away with launching stuff and us not knowing. But maybe nowadays you can launch satellites that are so small, they're still very capable of doing things, but are so small that you can get it up there before anybody else knows about it.
Yes, it's funny you mentioned the Black Shuttle because a previous guest of this show as well, Sword, had talked about that, and also the Happy Go Pukey. He claims in Alaska there's a subterranean that launches up, I guess, using air to shoot up vehicles, shuttles, etc. Jettisoned, I guess, which reaches the orbit. So he has a little name, the Happy Go Pukey. I think that would be an interesting ride. I tried asking him what that ride is like, but I guess the name, infers the scenario. But have you ever heard of that? Anything like that here on this Earth?
No. I'm not familiar with anything like that.
Right. Well, Black Shuttle, that's definitely interesting. We definitely got to get Sword on again and talk more about that, because I think that's a connection there. Why not? It makes, good for another show. And usually when he does come on, he has things to say, so who knows. But other than that, all right, so now that the switch has begun, I know you're retired, sir, but have you been pursuing? Or can you pursue to get info for us? Maybe come back on again about where this guy and Tucker get their info about pilots of various nations, obviously ours too. Again, that was the unspoken disclosure that they've encountered them and have engaged them, and some have died. Could you follow up or know anyone that can for us?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have connections anymore. I don't know who would have connections that you're interested in. There probably are various people looking into that stuff.
Right. There's a person in the chat called InfoWars WikiLeaks. Oh, what's up, by the way? Thanks for tuning in. And he writes, I still think the Pentagon UFO videos are just government craft / drones. Now, why, sir, what would you say to someone like that, even though I know you went into some details already? But you're a physicist and whatnot. Please help him and any layperson the seriousness of why you say what you do compared to someone that states that statement, that they're just government craft.
Well, to say that I guess he was, this person was saying the Tic Tac was a drone. Is that?
Right, basically, yes. That whatever the video show is government craft or drones. Maybe it's the way to poke at the Chinese, but I don't know. That's a good tactic, too. I would do it and use it. But go ahead, sir.
Well, Kevin Day, who was a radar operator on the Princeton, and talked about seeing these objects traveling along at 28,000 feet, about 100 knots, just sort of lazily moving along, heading southward, as the Princeton and the Nimitz group were 50 or 60 miles off the coast, I guess. And these things were sort of between them and the coast. Anyway, he was watching on radar and saw these things dropping downwards almost to the surface of the water, almost to the water itself. 28,000 feet, 28,000 foot drop in 8/10 of a second. I don't think you can build a drone that would do that.
That could even withstand the forces of it, right? Let alone anyone surviving it. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
That's incredible. So hopefully InfoWars, WikiLeaks, hopefully that helps you conceive a little bit more on the instances. Remember, they only shown us little bits and pieces of video that must be much more expansive than what we're not seeing, you know what I mean? So, but I see the point you make, but definitely Dr. McAfee's point, you know, the speed. And then to come to a complete halt. Is that what it did too? It came to a complete halt above the ocean?
Yes.
Wow. Talk about stopping on a dime.
That was 9 cents change.
Wow. So, again, show of force. Ours, someone else's.
That's why I say they're playing with us. They're so far advanced compared to us that they can dance around, do anything they want, and they know we can't get them.
It just makes us wonder, though. Them. You said it.
Yep.
Who are them? Where are them? And
them, they're those.
I got this.
There was a movie called Them.
Yeah, yeah. Also dealing with ants, giant ants. We're the little, little morsels. But the shoes are reversed there, huh? But I still have this feeling that Mars plays a big part in all of this, and it would make sense because what I see as that planet, you know, I see it as artistically sculpted on an entire planetary scale. I know, so I'm crazy. Believe me, there are some that'll tell you that. But in the work that I do, I base it off the data. See, I also process imagery from the raw, and I analyze the data, and that's my opinion, you know, and everyone else's findings and stuff certainly does not wipe out that theory. Now, doesn't make me exactly proud of that theory, because if anything, it adds weight to it, and then it's like, okay, higher than human intelligence definitely did this, let alone to be able to carve it up. But in the way that they did, Carl Sagan said, you know, regarding people asking questions, you know, how would they look for, you know, extraterrestrial civilizations and such. People, of course, said buildings, roads, it's typical of how life as we know. But he said, well, basically fine, but no, it's their geometry. And it's the geometry that's left behind, whether it's ruined or pristine. The geometry shows the intelligence that nature just does not make or duplicate or create, you know. So whoever did that had the ability to do some amazing things, and I think that would be up to the scale of the type of tech that we're seeing. And if we're going there, maybe those are real reasons why we're going to Mars. Maybe it has to do... Can I ask you something, sir? In any of those old files from the FBI or any of the UFO experiences or even abductions in that case, is Mars even hinted at or mentioned at all as a possibility in any of this? Because look where the nations are wanting to go now. I mean, certainly this has got to tie in somewhere. But what are your thoughts on that, sir?
Well, first of all, there's nothing in the FBI file or the CIA file that directly addresses Mars. Of course, you got to realize that the CIA, FBI files are really old now. They're mostly stuff from back in the 50s and 60s.
Right.
I don't know. I get my knowledge about Mars from the movie Total Recall.
That's a good comeback. I like that. So does sure, they can appreciate that. No shit.
we'll just melt the caps, melt the polar caps, and flood the surface, and everything will turn up green and rosy in about a week.
It does make me wonder. My mind races because this is our reality. I've also experienced, I know, again, I'm crazy, but it don't matter because I'm here on this new timeline to help make our fate. And in time, we'll see how crazy I am, right? But in the meantime, there's valid science here. There's real things. There's verifiable work that's been done, and go through the things that the public has did only to now, at a time when I think your work and your efforts are more important now than they were before. Does anyone ever tell you that or suggest that?
No.
You know I'm right. Especially with everything going on in the world now, we must consider they're already here. We know that they've been here, but are they here? And everything going on may be connected to this higher intelligence plan of being around, of what is going on. If things are escalating, it just makes me wonder, sir. That's all. I'm just babbling.
Yeah. Comparing the situation now with 50, 60, 70 years ago, with respect to UFOs.
Right. But the tech
it helps to know the history of the subject to support the present. People who are all newbies in this subject are going by what they hear and unidentified on TV and the Project Blue Book movie series and stuff like that, and they have no idea, no feeling for what happened 50 or 60, 70 years ago that set the stage for what's going now.
Right.
That's why I like to bring, for example, a jump of 40 years from the New Zealand sightings showing objects that zip around and hover one place for a few seconds and then zip off to some other place. And they do it just as if they accelerate instantaneously to a high speed, travel some distance, and stop on a dime, not less than a dime. And for the people not starting nowadays, well, this unidentified investigation with Elizondo and the other guys, all put together by Tom DeLonge. They're presenting information as if nobody had ever heard of it before, and it is all new to everybody, especially these observables they talk about, the apparent anti-gravity capability, the high acceleration, the high speed, and so on. The non-aerodynamic shape, but independent. There's no aerodynamic shape, which means we don't know how they manage to stay at hover in one position. They seem to have beaten gravity. Well, all these observables that they're presenting as if they were something new, it's like they're saying, we've studied this for a few weeks or a few days or a few months, and we've come up with this list of characteristics that seem to be common to these crafts, and nobody else seems to have ever done this before. But if you go back to July of 1947, you can find a document by an Air Force person listing all but one of these observables. The bottom line is, this stuff has all been known before. There's nothing new under the sun, nothing new under the UFO. It's it supports the claims of, for example, Fravor saying he's out of this thing going zigzagging as it travels along, and instead of going in a straight line or making curves, it goes from one direction to another. It just sort of travels along and does a right angle turn. It looks like a ping pong ball bouncing off the sides of a box or something.
Yeah, like a Pong game. Pong, and it ricochets off on a dime, right? And boom, like, whoa, not stopping speed, maybe even accelerating sometimes. You know, really make it look like Pong. But it's really incredible of what's going on out there. So I reached out to Elizondo, Louis Elizondo and them, to that company that, I guess, and they, politely declined. I mean, granted, I'm no coast to coast or anything, but, it's like, I have questions. I have listeners that have questions. To me, the impression I got, it seems to be more about the money still, man. I'm like, you know what? When money takes a shit, and then these things start showing up more, people that look, like the scriptures say, people are destroyed for lack of knowledge, ignorance. And like you said, basically, all the work that was done only to be made the public to be ignorant, make a joke out of. Now they're trying to do a whoop-de-doo, a turnaround to change the name, bring it forth like it's new, and to, again, and just the people that have experienced this phase of time before, that now to the newer generations who, a lot of people don't even seem to care. Have you noticed that too? Have you noticed that too, Dr. Bruce?
Well, the self cover-up is still in play.
Right.
Hello? So you're having trouble with the transmission or something. Hello?
Can you hear me okay?
You come in and fade in and out sometimes. I don't know what's going on. But anyway, as I was saying, the self cover-up is still in play. There's very few people out there advocating that we should welcome the visitors, shall we say. We don't really know what's going on, and we don't know if this is a situation of us versus the ants. There's the ants, then there's us, then there's the aliens, and I don't know whether we're closer to ants than we are closer to the aliens as far as intelligence and capability is concerned.
In your opinion, sir, based on your military experience and working on various lasers and missiles and, SDI, Star Wars, I assume, that was another name for it, right? In your experience and knowledge over the years, now with the creation of the Space Force, are you, at least in that military mindset, to where, well, you're sure that these people are dealing with those issues and questions above our heads, or are you there maybe giving comments, or can you comment on the work that was done and the type of, who knows where we're at now in terms of the scale of these weapons and what can be utilized in space? Do you think that they are trying to deal with these UAPs?
Well, if it's us versus them, we may as well cut and run, I guess. When I was working on the SDI program, Strategic Defense Initiative, aka Star Wars, which President Reagan started when he in 1983, when he became aware that there was nothing he could do if Russia were to launch missiles. The only thing you can do is suck them up. Of course, you could send some back to Russia, and it was only this situation of mad, mutual assured destruction that kept us from using missiles, I guess. Anyway, Reagan didn't like the idea that the only thing we could do would be to suck it up if the Russians lost the missile. So he said, isn't there some way of handling this problem? And that led to a big investigation that answered the question, can you devise a weapon of some sort that will stop a nuclear missile from hitting the United States?
Right.
And that grew into what they call architecture, a structure of multiple types of weapons linked together to attack oncoming missiles. And that included big lasers, which I was involved in, things called so-called neutral particle beams and smart rocks, little rockets that had capability of changing their directions and smashing into missiles. The idea being you wanted to try to get a missile off course, or better yet, have it break up into pieces before it sets itself off and create an atomic explosion. Atom bombs are bad, not only if they hit the ground. If they hit the ground, then they put a lot of dirt and dust and stuff into the atmosphere, which stays for a long time. And of course, it destroys whatever buildings there are around for many miles, turns areas into a desert. But even if it explodes up above the ground, there's an electromagnetic pulse generated, which affects electrical devices of all sorts all over the place. Things get nasty real fast when you don't have electricity. Well, I kept my ears open for any indication that this architecture for defense against missiles, the architecture being you had big lasers up there that were so powerful they could burn holes in the side of the missile. You had neutral particle beams up there, which were another device for burning a hole in a missile and doing whatever is necessary to make it go off course. And then there were these so-called smart rocks that were like little rockets that could change their direction in order to fall up against and smash into a missile. I kept my ears and eyes open for anything that looked like this architecture was built to handle a threat from the outside. And I never saw any indication the threat from the outside was being addressed. Everything that was being done from the sensor systems that were going to turn the defense missiles on, saying there's something coming, you better get ready to shoot it down. The sensor systems and then the actual weapons themselves were designed, so far as I could tell, only to attack things launched from the Earth. That would be missiles. And we had to worry about things like the Russians had, I forget what the number was now, some thousand number of missiles that they could have launched. If they did it all at once, we had no choice, no chance. You could handle one missile or maybe 10 missiles if you had enough things like a dozen huge lasers on space and neutral particle beams and smart rocks. It required a lot of stuff up there ready to shoot down something that was launched from the surface of the Earth. This was all done on paper. There were things being built to test stuff, like there were huge these powerful lasers that have mirrors. The laser has a mirror to focus the radiation about 10 meters, 30 feet in diameter. You'd have to have about half a dozen or a dozen laser powered lasers with these things that would be megawatt level lasers and extremely large.
Well, Ronald,
the bottom line was we ran the program ran from 1985 roughly. Once it got started, it ran from about 1985 to 1992 or 3. Now during that time, certain architectures were found to fail, and certain architectures were found to be possibly satisfactory. Nevertheless, you had the problem that if one missile got through, you were in big trouble. To say nothing of 10 or 50 or 100, if they're all launched at one time. The tit for tat would destroy the Earth. Well, about the same time as the 1990-1991 time frame, Russia was falling apart, you may remember.
True.
And it began to look like the Star Wars program provided the necessary impetus or the final push of Russia over the edge, because they realized if we actually went ahead and built one of these things, architecture to handle their threat. They couldn't do the same for us against us, and we would wipe them out.
Right.
So Reagan's feeling that there should be some way of handling this problem without destroying humanity was essentially correct. We convinced the Russians that we could do something that would make their defenses useless, and it was a big bluff in a sense, but they fell for it, fortunately.
And at the same time, Ronald Reagan was also going around always making the speeches while the Soviet Union was still going on about alien presence among us, if we were faced with an alien threat from outside this world, constantly. I mean, and then when he said it, and yet I ask, is there not an alien presence already amongst us? That, to me, that tells a lot. But you're saying that they were, as far as you know, they're pointed downward, not outward.
Yes, and there is a foreign alien threat right now. It's called COVID-19.
Yeah, Chinese Kung Flu. Incredible. Now, and that's the threat we got to deal with too. The Chinese, they were expecting to have the rule of the world, to get everything that they could have acquired once our nation fell from the traders. Are you more optimistic now that things didn't go down to the one world order way, at least the way on the surface? Are you optimistic now that we have a space force and the race is on to Mars? And what do you predict regards to UFOs as we start expanding into space? I think it's a given, but go ahead.
Well, first of all, I'm going to predict that this Navy program, the UAPTF, the UAP Task Force, will confirm what has already been suspected by ufologists, that we are confronted by non-human intelligences flying around, and the next president, whoever he is, may be the first president required to handle this situation, somehow cope with the disclosure, you might say. There hasn't been a formal disclosure on the part of them. They've just sort of buzzed around the periphery of our civilization, appearing to some people and not appearing to other people, and really not doing much of a thing that would attract a lot of interest, like they're not blowing up cities or causing the oceans to evaporate or something like that. So I predict that they will find that. I predict that the government will confirm what we already know, that these non-human intelligences are flying around, and then whoever, as I said, whoever's the next president will likely have to handle this situation, invent some so-called exopolitics.
Right.
So, who speaks for the Earth?
Do you think that their presence here in the 40s and stuff goes to at least to the what they want us to think is the truth of it, that they only showed up because of our nuclear weapons, but yet I hear they can turn them off, so why just show up when they see them? Or is that a cover for something else to allude that they've been here much longer? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, there was the thought when sightings started happening in the late spring of the 1947, that the onset of UFO sightings might well have been, some people said, let's suppose that it was a question of the atomic bombs being set off were seen by somebody at a distance, and they thought they'd better get over here and see what's going on. But they were already here. They've been here for a long time. So waited until we actually had, well, nuclear rockets installed in silos starting in the late 50s. They were, digging big holes in the ground and burying, and making sure that these missiles could get ejected, and this was the part of the mutual assured destruction aspect. The aliens may well have thought, we can't let them destroy this planet for whatever reason, so we better show them that we're in power. Being able to shut down our missiles like they did in the 1960s, starting in the 1960s, is a good way to convince us not to mess around with the aliens.
Yeah. So, in your opinion, they could still do that today if they wanted to, even if we launched?
They might be able to shoot something down. I don't know. We know that there's that case of a missile that was launched from Vandenberg Air Force Base.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
Westward over the ocean, and what's his name? Who reported this, talked about them having a big telescope that was watching the missile travel along, and all of a sudden they saw some object come and zap some beams towards the missile, and then the missile went off course.
Right.
I can't think of the guy's name who told that.
It's on the tip of my tongue too. And he described it as circling around it, shooting it twice, where it looked like a laser, and then it went off course and blew up or something.
Yeah, they had this all on film.
Right. That's amazing.
It still hasn't been released.
Huh. So, well, I know it's getting late, sir. So it's, we're going to close down in a few. But do you have any words of wisdom and words of, what we should do now to make our fate, to take the future into our hands, and what we need to do? Yes. What is your opinion on what we need to do? Do you have any words to all the listeners here on what we need to do and what we may face and why? And thank you very much for joining us.
Well, in general, I say we got to get our act together. We certainly got to get rid of the virus problem and get ourselves as healthy as possible. That requires a lot of political maneuvering, I guess, with respect to the Mideast. I don't know. Well, we have to make sure that China, there's a lid on China, shall we say, and they won't try to blow it off. And if we get a space force, I suspect it be put up there as part of the lid on China. I'd be surprised if the Space Force is going to be designed to handle a threat from the outside, because I can tell you from studying the situation with the SDI, we might be able to direct the energy, directed energy weapon that would be sufficient to wipe out an alien spaceship or something like that. But that requires you locking on, having some optical system that can lock onto the alien spaceship and then can slow your beam around to point towards it. And everything that we do would be just too slow, I think. So we better be nice to the aliens. Win by capitulation.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's what worries me. And if they're here steering things, maybe they're the ones helping to try to create this new world order. I don't know if you're a spiritual man or a believer, sir, in Scripture, but I am. But, I know kingdom will come, and I know a lot of strange things have happened, and especially to me in my life, I'm an experiencer on top of it. And I'm open for all possibilities, but I could clearly see now how the world's just been going just by the past year. I could easily see us now being in seeing the fulfillment of those scriptures, you know, and it's just, it shows an enemy, two sides at war with each other. When you look at the basics, there's definitely some cat and mouse going on, game playing, deceptions, infiltrations. And it could have been them that helped squish this to begin with, your research and many others, to help it bring it to a point to where the public was dumbed down about it. But if this Space Force and Trump thing is really what it is, this Q thing rather, maybe the turnaround now by the Pentagon coming out and doing that, yeah, they're going to uphold to that, like you said, hopefully, like you predict, the next president will be that one. I mean, we got to come to that point sooner or later anyway, right? And I think sooner better than later, but I don't know. But do you have any final thoughts, sir, and or comments?
I think our visitors are trying to figure out how they can adapt to us. I'm in particular familiar with Ed Walter's story. Ed Walters was a guy in Gulf Breeze, Florida, who took a lot of pictures, but he had abduction experiences as well. And to make a long story short, it looked very much as if he was being used to teach baby aliens. He talked about situations where he'd be in a room, for example, and one scenario that sticks in my mind is at night he's asleep and he has a dream that he remembers later on. He has this dream that he's in a building, in a room with two 50-gallon drums, oil tank drums, and he's in the room with two children and himself. And suddenly a hole opens in one of the walls of the room, and some monster creature like a big alligator or something comes out. And Ed Walter says he's confronted with the choice of, does he get in one tank and he puts one kid in the other tank and he leaves the third kid out, or does he put the two kids in the tanks, which are protected, and tries to hold off the creatures himself? And he says he decided to put the kids in the 50-gallon drums, and then he would take on this creature. He says at that point, once he made this decision, the walls of the room faded away, and he gets marched into another room where they sit him on a table and put a special type of headgear on his head, which has a point of contact in the front of his forehead. In the very back of his head, there's another point of contact. Then at the left side over his left ear, and the right side over his right ear. So 4 points of contact on his head. His head is sort of like a helmet, but it's just got these 4 points of contact. Then he says, and he's sitting on his table, and another door opens, and in come a bunch of short creatures, small aliens, he says, and they set them on a table, and each one of these aliens has a little headgear put on it, which is the same sort of thing that he's got on his head. And there's a dozen or something of these alien children, and then he finds himself suddenly reliving this experience of being in a room with the barrels and the creatures and so on. And he said there were a number of times that happened. He had different experiences in life, different life experiences which you have to relive as if it was a recorder, and they played back the recording for these kids after he had some experience.
Wow.
That sort of a thing, if it's true and straightforward interpretation, that would mean to me that they were trying to this is a way of introducing the children of the aliens to living as a human being.
Huh.
That's really well, you can get all sorts of stories out of the various abductees as to what's going on, but this is the most cogent story that I'm aware of.
Wow. Now, I guess before you go, those videos of the aliens, you've seen them, the alien interviews, where they came out in several segments, talking about
20 years ago.
Yeah, but even in recent years, it's been going around. The alien looks really cool looking. Well, to me, it looks cool looking. It might scare the shit out of somebody in front of it. But the military guys are asking him questions. Trying to catch him in lies, threatening him. If he lies, they'll shoot. They'll give him something, and to threaten him to continue talking, like asking about the cosmos, God, what happened on the Earth. And the alien tells him a nuclear war, that he's from our future, from Earth, that basically we're like an ancestor. Have you seen those ones?
I've seen some from many years ago. They weren't as detailed as you're talking about. I don't remember anybody threatening an alien.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's out there. If anyone could provide me the link quick, or you better send it to Dr. Backaby himself, so he could check it out and hear what all is said. It is interesting. Some people say it's fake, but then again, I don't know, because even in the evidence of the videos, it looks like they share a scene where he might have got given a shot or a jolt or something. They thought the alien was lying. They didn't appreciate his answers on a couple of the things. But again, it's interesting, But other than that, do you have any final comments or any?
Let me state my website. There's over 60 different items of big discussion, including UFO sightings that nobody else has analyzed that on the website, which is BRUMAC brumac.mysite.com, brumac.mysite.com, and there's enough there to keep you off the streets for a few days if you're going to read it all.
Yes, indeed, and it's very worth following. And again, it's historical, and I think everything's connected. And I'd like to know and see, any follow-ups and any connections to all of these to what should be asked now of the UAPs. I think it's fair game now. I think that's fair, isn't it? Do you think so too, sir?
What's fair?
The asking now about the things relating to UAPs of all your discoveries from the past, and are they going to come out with telling us truths or declassifying aspects about these UAPs that may be relevant to the researches that you have put forth over the years that are connected?
Yeah. Well, I've long said you have to really understand what happened back at the beginning. That's why I wrote a whole book about the first sighting. If you go and read 3 Minutes in June, you'll find that Kenneth Arnold had just about everything, all the observables, except for abduction.
Wow. All right. So, well, hopefully we're willing to come back to the Martian revelation in the future.
Okay. I look forward to it.
All right. Excellent. So, again, thank you for your time, sir, and staying up so late. I know you're on the East Coast, but it's valuable. Trust me, especially to those down through time. I know. I'm crazy. But thank you very much for appearing with us. You have a good night, sir.
Thank you for the invitation, and good night yourself.
All right. Thank you. Goodbye. So, everyone, Dr. Bruce Maccabee, that was. So very interesting. Again, consistencies in the technologies. Nothing new under the sun. You heard him himself. Space Force, he's optimistic, has hopes for, and dealing with these issues and what we have to adapt to. At least that's what I'm getting out of it. I'm not just hearing what I want to hear. But very valuable work and research over the years. And like he said, the history is very important. Because again, the scripture is right. Many people are doomed because of their ignorance, lack of knowledge. And this is a compendium of knowledges that have been done. People's lives have changed, have been destroyed, and some have profited from these researchers trying to get it to us. And, and dealing with the UAPs, they got to start coming out with more about it than what has been said over the years, in my opinion. If anything, the bridge has got to be capped. It's got to be built. You know, there's holes all over it over the years, acclamations and, you know, foo-foo factors. It's turning around now. Now it's serious. Now it's UAPs. I don't know. I find it very interesting. I still say Mars is involved. Those subsurface illegals are very smart. And if you could carve up entire planetary surfaces, again, you look for that geometry. That's all I see. I just wish I was a math-type brain side of guy to see and lay it all out of the art that I'm able to see, but it's so immense, so fantastic. You know, I see the art. It's hard to put it in words, but they're going. Why do you think they're going there? Keeping the secrets, and, you know, the Mars they now know is not the Mars we now know. Let's put it that way. Subsurface illegals are there. Remember, they told us years ago, Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter was being sent to reconnoiter a foreign planet. Foreign. Why you put that at foreign? Foreign means nation. The alienation of the subsurface illegals. You can't make this shit up. We're going to put American boots on the face of Mars. You can't make that shit up either, yet everyone's clapping. Yay! Thinking it's astronauts bringing flags and flowers. Bullshit. He said American boots. Military term, because that was in the spiel for the Space Force. They're bringing M60s, or the equivalent of space weaponry. Why? Why do they need many more boots out there? Secret space programs. Okay, that's been kept hidden from us and whatnot. We've had various guests on this show. Many of you are well aware of many more and other deepers than that. We'll get into those subjects on this show. I don't know everything, but I do know one thing. I'm phased back through time on a man with a mission to help make our fate. And you here listening right now is just adding to that, to it being solid, the timeline solid. But we have to fight for this timeline to make our fate. Do we have a chance against the threats coming from deep space? Are they connected to Mars and the life? That goes back to the opening news articles. What came first? Life from Earth to seed Mars, or Mars to seed Earth, or maybe even vice versa a couple times? Or is it some universal life that came there, seeded Mars and Earth? And who knows what else? Venus and wherever else. We're just one solar system out of billions. And you're going to tell me there's no God? Or tell me there's no creation or no capacity of, when the intelligence of carving up entire planetary surfaces, leaving faces, pyramids, scouring hardscapes. Whether it's there and on Earth, we can't explain a quarter of the shit we're finding here that's still buried. We can't duplicate it. Ancient aliens. How do you know? How do you know it's not ancient humans? Or, well, some other higher form of intelligence that may be more in connection with the knowledge of the technologies here. If they've always been here, it might be safe to assume there's some other breed here on the Earth or around it or in our solar system that has lived here before humans. Especially if you believe in creation aspects and the sideline whoop-de-doo stories attributed to that, to the Bible even. Genetic engineering, I mean, again, you can't make this shit up. But that's the realities we're facing, that we have to adapt to. So it's old and known. We're the ones who are behind, like he said, the ants. I don't know. But things are being up, that there's escalations. You feel me? Engagements of Russians and Chinese, and therefore not saying obviously, which you're supposed to be smart enough to think of, American pilots as well as engaged in lost lives and craft. Need a Space Force. Got to put American boots on that face of Mars. And remember this also. The face of Mars, for years, downplayed It's a mountain. It's a massive. It's a hill. They don't know what the hell it is. And that's it, official position. While yet officially, they keep calling it the face of Mars. And then when the presidents say this, of course, everyone's clapping. They have no clue. But yet, you see how things forming up. Thank you, General Dunford. Good luck. Now go get it. Go get what? Our fate. Thank you, X-Warp. He got it. What about you? Or am I just crazy? Yeah, I am crazy. I mean, I gotta be. You know, I don't even know why I give a shit. Live life. Do what you gotta do. No. I'm called to this. More ways than one. I in this show have phased back through time yet. I'm crazy. Taylor 2 Captains. I'm crazy. UFO Diaries, Code of Sidonia, down through time. I'm crazy. The experiences I've experienced, as well as my mother. I'm crazy. Well, we're going to see. As I know, until next week, God willing and beyond, please hit that big red, white, and blue American donate button. And I hate doing that. But there, you know, no special clubs, no special subscriptions. It's got to come from the heart. You got to be true to yourself and be true to others. And especially co-producers Being Green, Global Enlightenment Radio Network, Odin. They see value in this crazy person. I don't know. All I know is that the only advice I was told, and I should tell you, you're going to go far, kid.
Show me how to lie, you're getting better all the time, and turning all against one isn't art that's hard to teach. Another clever word sets off an unsuspecting hurt, and as you step back in the line, a mob jumps to their feet. Now dance, fucker, dance, man, you never had a chance, and no one even knew it was really only you, and now you steal away. Take your life to what you did, you're gonna go far, kid. With 1,000 eyes in a good disguise, hit 'em right between the eyes, hit 'em right between the eyes. When you walk away, nothing but excites. See the lightning in your eyes, see you running for the light. Slowly out of line and drifting closer in your sight, so play it out, I'm wide awake. It's a scene about me. There's something in your way, and now someone is gonna pay. And if you can't get what you want, well, it's all because of me. Now dance, fucker, dance, man.